The son had been trying to kill Elias Vorn for 3 days straight, and he'd been returning the favor by refusing to die. That was the arrangement they had. Mutual contempt with no resolution in sight. He rode through country that looked like God had gotten bored halfway through creation, all cracked earth and scattered rock that served no purpose except to break ankles and mock ambition. His canteen was 2/3 empty. His horse, a gray mare with a temperament like rusted wire, plodded forward with the enthusiasm of a man walking to his own hanging. Elias didn't blame her. This wasn't country you passed through because you wanted to. It was country you crossed because the alternative was worse. He'd been riding alone for 6 years. Not because he preferred it that way, but because preference stopped mattering after the first year and became simple fact after the third. People complicated things. They had needs and opinions and ways of getting themselves killed that somehow became your problem. The desert was honest. It would kill you too, but at least it didn't pretend to be your friend first. The horse appeared as a dark shape against lighter sand, maybe 200 yards off the trace he was following. Elias almost missed it. Would have, if the wind hadn't shifted and carried a sound. Not quite a whinny, more like air being pushed through a broken instrument. He reined up. The mare sensed his hesitation and stopped without complaint, happy for any excuse to quit moving. Probably dead already, Elias said to no one. The shape didn't move. The sound came again, thinner this time, weaker. Elias sat there. The smart thing was to keep riding. The safe thing. The thing that had kept him alive through country where stopping got people buried. He looked at his canteen, did the math on water and distance, and came up with numbers that didn't include charity. The mare shifted her weight. A fly landed on Elias's wrist, and he didn't bother brushing it away. Damn it! He turned the mare toward the shape. Up close, it was worse than he'd expected. The horse was a chestnut stallion, maybe 4 years old, with the kind of build that spoke to careful breeding and decent feed. Someone had invested time in this animal. Then someone, probably the same someone, had wrapped wire around its legs in 4 places, tight enough to cut, and left it here to figure out dying. The wire wasn't regular fencing material. It was the kind of thing you used for punishment, for teaching a lesson that needed to hurt on the way to being learned. Elias dismounted slowly. The stallion's head came up an inch, ears swiveling to track him. Its eyes were wrong, not glazed with approaching death, but sharp, alert, computing odds that probably didn't add up to anything good. Easy, Elias said, and immediately felt stupid. Nothing about this was easy. He approached from the side, giving the animal time to decide whether he was another problem or possibly a solution. The stallion's breathing was shallow, rapid. Its coat was dark with sweat and dust and blood that had baked into a crust around the wire. Flies swarmed the wounds, black and busy. Elias crouched 6 feet away and waited. The sun pressed down like a hand. Sweat ran into his eyes and he let it sting because moving too fast now would spook the horse and waste whatever chance this was. Someone did a real thorough job on you, he said quietly. Professional meanness. That's a specific skill. The stallion's ears flicked. It was listening, weighing his voice against its circumstances. Making decisions horses shouldn't have to make. Elias pulled his knife, an 8-inch blade he'd carried for 12 years, older than his solitary streak, and considerably more reliable. The stallion saw it and tried to lurch away, but the wire held and the movement opened the cuts wider. Fresh blood welled up, dark and thick. Yeah, I know, Elias said. Nothing good ever came at you with a blade before. But we've got a problem. You're going to die out here, maybe in an hour, maybe 3, and I'm going to ride away feeling like shit about it, or we can try something else. He moved closer, slowly, giving the horse time to understand that this approach was different from the one that had left it tied in the sand. The stallion's muscles were bunched tight, ready to fight or flee, or both, except the wire made both options equally useless. Elias reached the first binding, left foreleg, where the wire had cut deepest. The smell hit him, copper and rot mixed with fear sweat. He set the knife against the wire and started sawing. The stallion jerked, then went rigid. Elias kept pressure steady, not talking now because words wouldn't help. The wire parted with a sound like a nail being pulled from green wood. Blood ran fresh, and the horse's breathing hitched. That's one, Elias muttered. He moved to the right foreleg. This wire was older, set longer, crusted with scab material that made the cutting harder. The blade slipped and nicked the horse's leg. The stallion lunged sideways, nearly taking Elias's face off with a blind rear hoof. "All right," Elias said, breathing hard. "Fair." He repositioned, got a better angle. The wire came free. 2 down. The back legs were worse. The bindings there had been cinched tighter, maybe because whoever did this knew a horse with working hind legs could still kick your head into next week. The wire had cut through hide and into muscle. When Elias freed the right leg, the stallion screamed, an awful sound that belonged to slaughterhouses and dying things, not open desert. "Last one," Elias said. His hands were shaking. "Last one and we're done." The final wire came away and the horse collapsed. Just dropped like something cut loose from a ceiling, legs folding wrong, body hitting the sand with an impact that drove dust into the air. It lay there breathing in ragged pulls, flanks heaving. Elias sat back. His knife was smeared red. His hands, too. The sun kept doing its work, indifferent to mercy or its cost. He looked at his canteen, then at the horse, then at the vast, empty nothing surrounding them both. "This is stupid," he said. He opened the canteen and poured water over the worst wounds. Not much, just enough to clean some of the blood and give the horse a reason to believe this wasn't another cruelty disguised as help. The stallion's eyes tracked him, still wary but computing different odds now. Elias took off his shirt, ripped it into strips, and wrapped what he could. The bandages were terrible, too loose, too crude, but better than nothing. The horse didn't fight him. That seemed significant. When he finished, he sat in the sand beside the animal and took a drink. One swallow, because that was the ration. The water was hot and tasted like metal. "I'm Elias," he said to the horse. "I don't know why I'm telling you that. You're probably going to die anyway, and this is going to turn out to be the dumbest thing I've done in 6 years. The horse blinked. Its breathing had slowed, steadied. Not healthy, but less like imminent death. "I had a name once that people used," Elias continued. "Back when I lived in places with names. Then I left and it stopped mattering. That happens. You stop being a person and start being a set of choices, and if you make enough of them alone, pretty soon alone is all you know how to be." The stallion shifted its head, eyeing him with an expression that might have been understanding or might have been confusion. Hard to tell with horses. Elias stood up, every joint complaining. The mare watched this development with suspicion. She didn't like sharing resources or attention, and this wounded stallion represented both. "We're staying here tonight," Elias told her. "Don't give me that look. It's not like we had reservations somewhere better." He set up a minimal camp. No fire, just a bedroll positioned between the horses where he could watch both and anything that might approach with ideas. The sun began its slow surrender to the horizon, turning the sky colors that belonged in churches, if churches existed in country like this. The stallion tried to stand twice, failed both times. The third attempt got it halfway up before the legs gave out again, but Elias saw the determination in that effort. This animal hadn't quit on living yet. That was something. Night came down fast, the way it always did out here. Daylight until it wasn't, no gradual transition to soften the shift. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in as many minutes. Elias wrapped his coat tighter and listened to the desert arrange itself for darkness. That's when he heard them. At first it was just a sense of something wrong, a pressure in the air that made the mare's ears go flat. Then actual sound, hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming from the east at a pace that wasn't leisurely. Elias was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. His hand found the revolver on his hip, a motion so practiced it bypassed thought entirely. The riders appeared as shadows against darker sky, 4 of them, spread in a loose line. They slowed when they saw Elias's camp, the kind of slowing that meant they'd found what they were looking for. They stopped 30 yards out, close enough to talk, far enough to need raised voices. The lead rider was a thick man on a thick horse, both of them radiating the kind of casual violence that came from never being told no. "That's my horse you got there," the man said. His voice carried easy, used to being heard. Elias said nothing. His hand stayed on his gun. "You deaf?" A different voice, younger. "My brother's talking to you." Brothers, then. That explained the matching arrogance. Elias still didn't speak. Words right now would just fill space that needed to stay empty. The lead rider shifted in his saddle. "Here's what happens next. You step away from that animal. We take what's ours. You ride out. Everybody lives. That how it worked when you wired it up and left it to die? Elias asked. The question hung there for a beat. That horse has a discipline problem, the lead rider said. We were teaching it manners. Seems like a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Seems like you're making this complicated when it doesn't need to be. The rider's hand moved to his own weapon. I'm Calder Hale. This here's my brother Rusk and two of our associates. We own everything in a day's ride of here. That includes horses. That includes the water you probably wasted on our property, and it definitely includes your continued good health. Elias recognized the speech. He'd heard versions of it before, different words, but same meaning. This was the part where reasonable men made reasonable choices and avoided unreasonable consequences. Horse is dying anyway, Elias said. Probably won't last the night. Why not just leave it? Because it's ours, Rusk said. The younger brother had a thin, eager voice. Because we say what happens to it. Because that's how things work. And because we don't like questions, Calder added. So let's skip the rest of the conversation. Step away. Last chance. The stallion, lying between Elias and the four riders, made a sound, low, almost a growl. Its ears were back, flat against its skull. The animal was reading the situation with an intelligence that went beyond training. Elias's thumb found the hammer on his revolver. Can't do that. What? I said I can't do that. Elias's voice was level, empty of everything except fact. I cut that wire. I used my water. That makes it my problem now. Rusk laughed. It was a sharp sound, too loud. You hearing this? This drifter thinks he's got... The stallion moved. Even wounded, even barely able to stand, it lunged forward, not at Elias, at Rusk. The horse covered 6 feet in a heartbeat, teeth bared, and Rusk's horse spooked sideways. Rusk grabbed for his gun, but the motion was wrong, balance gone, and the shot went wide, a bright crack in the dark that rolled out and died in empty space. Elias drew. His revolver cleared leather smooth and came up level, trained on Calder's chest. The motion was clean, practiced, the kind of thing you didn't think about because thinking slowed you down. Next person moves gets shot, Elias said quietly. The desert held its breath. Calder's hand was on his gun, but not drawn. The other two riders had frozen mid-reach. Rusk fought his spooked horse, trying to get control back. The stallion stood on trembling legs between Elias and the brothers, breathing hard but upright. You just made a bad mistake, Calder said. Probably, Elias agreed. But it's made now. You know what happens next? I expect you're going to tell me. Calder's smile was visible even in the dark. We're going to kill you. Not tonight, because that horse bought you some confusion, but we'll come back tomorrow, day after, and when we do, it won't be quick. That's the usual speech, Elias said. I've heard it before. And yet you're still here. Calder pulled his horse around slowly, hands visible. That says something about your learning capacity. Rusk finally got his mount under control. Calder, we can't just... We're leaving, Calder cut him off, because I want to kill this man proper, not in the dark where I can't watch his face. The four riders backed their horses up, maintaining distance. Elias kept his gun trained on Calder until they were 50 yards out, then 100. Only when they disappeared into darkness did he lower the weapon. His heart was hammering. His hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. He'd just traded temporary survival for permanent complication, and the math on that exchange wasn't pretty. The stallion collapsed again, energy spent. It lay in the sand, sides heaving, but it had stood when it mattered, had moved when movement changed everything. Elias holstered his gun and crouched beside the horse. That was either the smartest thing you've ever done or the dumbest. Either way, we're in it together now. The mare nickered nervously. She'd watched the whole thing with the judgment of something that knew trouble when it saw it. Yeah, Elias told her, I know. He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. He sat with his back against a rock, gun in his lap, watching the darkness for shapes that would resolve into men with intentions. The stallion drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes it would lift its head, checking to make sure Elias was still there. Each time Elias nodded like they had an agreement neither had put into words. Dawn came slow, painting the sky colors that promised another brutal day. When there was enough light to see by, Elias inspected the stallion's wounds. They looked bad, infected at the edges, swollen, but the horse was still breathing, still fighting. "You got a name?" Elias asked quietly. "Whoever owned you before these bastards probably called you something." The horse blinked at him. "Right. Fresh start, maybe." Elias poured a little more water, watched it disappear into sand and blood. "We need to move. They're coming back, and staying here turns us into targets." The question was whether the stallion could travel. Elias had his doubts, but doubt was currency he couldn't spend, so he pushed it aside and focused on what could be done versus what couldn't. He got the horse up. It took 3 tries and leverage he didn't quite have, but the animal finally stood. Its legs shook, its head hung low, but it was standing. "That'll do," Elias said. He loaded minimal gear onto the mare, leaving most of it behind. Speed mattered more than supply now. The stallion couldn't carry weight, could barely carry itself, but if it could walk, they had a chance. They moved north toward a line of hills that promised terrain complicated enough to make pursuit difficult. Elias led both horses, checking behind every few minutes for dust trails. The stallion followed, each step a negotiation between will and body. Twice it stumbled. Both times it caught itself. By midday, they'd covered maybe 5 miles. It felt like 50. The sun was doing its worst, and Elias's water was running critical. He'd made bad trades: water for a dying horse, safety for principle, and the desert was tallying costs with its usual precision. They stopped in the thin shade of an overhang, all 3 of them used up. Elias gave the horses the last of the water and kept none for himself. That was the trade. He'd made it, and backing out now wouldn't change the math. The stallion lowered itself carefully to the ground and watched Elias with those sharp, calculating eyes. "You keep looking at me like you're figuring something out," Elias said. His voice was rough, dried by heat and circumstance. "Like you're deciding whether this arrangement makes sense." The horse didn't respond. Didn't need to. "I don't know if we're going to make it," Elias continued. "Probably we're not. Those brothers have friends, resources. I've got a wounded horse and bad decisions. That's not a winning hand." He sat against the rock face, feeling every year of his life in his bones. "But I'll tell you what we do have. We've got forward. That's it. That's the whole strategy. Keep moving forward until forward stops being an option." The mare shifted nervously. She was smart enough to know their situation wasn't good. "There's a canyon system north of here," Elias said, talking to himself now more than the horses. 10, maybe 12 miles. If we can make that, the terrain shifts in our favor. Narrow passages, limited approach angles, turn their numbers into a liability instead of an advantage. The stallion's ear twitched. "Yeah, that's optimistic," Elias admitted. "But optimism and stupidity look a lot alike when you're desperate." He closed his eyes for just a moment, letting exhaustion pull at him. When he opened them, the sun had shifted maybe 20 minutes worth. The desert looked exactly the same, hostile, indifferent, waiting. "All right," he said to the horses. "Let's go be stupid some more." They moved out, 3 figures against endless empty, heading toward hills that promised complication. Behind them, somewhere in that vast stretch of nothing, 4 men were coming. 4 men who'd made their intentions clear. The math was simple. Elias had maybe a day before that gap closed. Maybe less. The stallion limped beside him, keeping pace despite legs that should have quit. The animal was running on something beyond physical capability, some reserve that existed past pain. Elias knew that place. He'd lived there for 6 years, riding alone, avoiding attachment, treating survival like a solo activity. And now here he was, betting everything on a horse that probably wouldn't live, and a principle that definitely wouldn't pay. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever done," he said aloud. The stallion snorted. It might have been agreement. It might have been something else. Either way, they kept walking. The sun hammered down. The hills got closer, inch by inch, and behind them, getting closer too, 4 riders followed a trail that couldn't be hidden. This was how things ended, Elias figured, not with glory or meaning, but with bad choices made for reasons that seemed important at the time. He'd stopped when he should have ridden on. He'd stayed when he should have left. He'd drawn a line when any smart man would have erased it. And somehow, despite all that, he didn't regret it. The stallion walked beside him, stubborn and hurting and refusing to quit. "Whatever happens," Elias said quietly, "you stood. When it mattered, you stood. That counts for something." The horse's ear flicked toward him, listening, understanding maybe, in whatever way horses understand. They walked into afternoon, 2 men and 2 horses, heading toward a canyon that might save them or might just delay the inevitable. The desert watched, indifferent as always, keeping its own counsel about which outcome made more sense. The canyon mouth opened like a wound in the earth, dark and narrow, and promising exactly the kind of complications Elias needed. They reached it 2 hours before sunset, all 3 of them running on fumes and spite. The stallion had made it further than Elias expected, which meant either the horse was tougher than it looked or too stubborn to understand when it was beaten. Probably both. Elias led them into the shade of the rock walls and felt the temperature drop 10 degrees immediately. The relief was physical, almost painful. He'd been cooking for hours, skin tight and burned, mouth full of copper taste that came from pushing too hard with too little water. The mare dropped her head, breathing hard. The stallion stood with legs braced wide, like standing itself required strategy. Its wounds had reopened during the walk, fresh blood mixing with old. Elias's makeshift bandages had come loose, trailing in the dust behind them like shed skin. "We made it," Elias said, and immediately felt stupid for stating the obvious to horses that couldn't answer back. He found a spot where the canyon widened slightly, enough room to position the horses against one wall with decent sight lines in both directions. The walls here rose 60 feet, maybe more, smooth rock that wouldn't give purchase to anything trying to climb. One way in, one way out. That cut both ways tactically, but right now it meant Calder and his brothers couldn't flank them without getting creative. Elias unsaddled the mare with hands that shook from exhaustion. His canteen was empty. Had been empty for hours. His tongue felt thick, useless. The horses were in worse shape. They needed water soon or the point became academic. He checked the stallion's legs, unwrapping the ruined bandages. The wounds looked angry, hot to touch. Infection was setting in proper now, not just threatening. The horse needed more than Elias could provide with a knife and torn shirt. It needed a veterinarian, antibiotics, rest, things that existed in towns with names, not canyons in the middle of nowhere. "You're not making this easy," Elias told the horse. The stallion turned its head, regarding him with an expression that might have been accusation or might have been understanding. Hard to say. Elias had spent 6 years alone specifically to avoid having to interpret looks like that. He sat down hard, back against rock that still held the day's heat. Every muscle in his body filed a complaint. He ignored them all with the practice of someone who'd learned to override his physical limitations through sheer bloody-mindedness. The sun was dropping fast now, turning the canyon walls orange and red. In maybe an hour it would be dark. Calder would come then, probably. Night made sense for an ambush, except this canyon took away most of the advantage darkness usually provided. The approaches were too narrow, too controlled. Anyone coming in would be funneled, exposed, vulnerable. Unless they were smart enough to wait. "That's what I'd do," Elias said aloud. His voice echoed slightly off the stone. "Sit outside, let thirst do the work. No risk, no cost. Just patience." The mare nickered softly, nervous. She didn't like being boxed in. Couldn't blame her. Elias pulled his revolver, checked the cylinder. 5 rounds. He had maybe 20 more in his saddlebag, but that was optimistic inventory. He'd been riding light, avoiding towns, avoiding reasons to need ammunition. That strategy was showing its flaws now. The stallion lowered itself to the ground carefully, each movement calculated to minimize pain. Once down, it didn't try to get back up, just lay there, watching Elias with those 2 intelligent eyes. "You keep looking at me like I have answers," Elias said. "I don't. I'm making this up as I go, and so far the results haven't been inspiring." The horse blinked slowly. "I know what you're thinking," Elias continued, aware he was talking to fill the silence more than communicate anything useful. "You're thinking this would be easier if I just left you in the desert. Quicker, at least. Less complicated." The stallion's ear twitched. "Yeah, well, I've been accused of overcomplicating things before." Elias leaned his head back against the rock, closing his eyes. "There was a woman once, Sarah. She told me I had a gift for taking simple situations and turning them into disasters. She wasn't wrong." The canyon held the words for a moment, then let them disperse. "That was 7 years ago. Different life, different version of me. I was a deputy in a town called Grafton, population 200 on a good day. Had a badge, a salary, a woman who tolerated my company. all the trappings of civilization. He opened his eyes, looked at the darkening sky visible between the canyon walls. Then the Garrick brothers rode through. You know the type. 6 men with guns and ideas about other people's property. The sheriff, my boss, he wanted to negotiate, find common ground. Let them take what they wanted and move on. The mayor shifted position, settling in for the night. I disagreed with that strategy, loudly. The sheriff told me to stand down. I told him that standing down was the same as bending over. We had what you might call a philosophical difference. Elias's hand moved to his gun, touching it like a talisman. The Garricks took the bank, killed 2 people doing it. The sheriff found common ground by looking the other way. And I found myself with a choice: accept how things worked or make a different choice. The stallion was still watching him, listening, maybe, or just too tired to look elsewhere. I made the different choice, went after them alone, caught up to them 2 days outside town, killed 4 of the 6. The other 2 got away, but not before one of them put a bullet through my shoulder. Elias touched the spot reflexively, feeling the scar through his shirt. When I rode back to Grafton, the sheriff met me at the town line, told me my services were no longer required, told me I'd violated protocol, exceeded authority, endangered the community, all the language people use when they mean you made them look bad. He was quiet for a moment, remembering. Sarah was waiting at my room. I thought maybe she'd come to tell me she understood, that sometimes the right thing looked wrong from certain angles, but she hadn't. She came to tell me I was too rigid, too quick to violence, too unwilling to bend. She said I needed to learn when to fight and when to walk away. Then she walked away. The canyon was fully dark now, stars beginning to appear in the strip of sky overhead. So I learned, Elias said softly. I learned to walk away from everything. Towns, people, complications. I learned to ride alone and keep riding because alone meant simple and simple meant surviving. And I was good at it. 6 years, no attachments, no problems that couldn't be solved by leaving. He looked at the stallion. Then I found you. The horse huffed softly, breath misting in the cooling air. And now here we are, boxed in a canyon, outgunned, out of water, waiting for 4 men who have every reason to kill us and no reason not to. Elias laughed, a dry sound. Sarah would say I told you so. The sheriff too, probably. They'd all say this is what happens when you don't learn to walk away. He stood up, joints protesting, walked to the canyon mouth and looked out at the desert beyond. Nothing moved in the dimness. No dust, no shapes, no indication that anyone was coming. That meant nothing. Calder could be 100 yards away or 10 miles, waiting or approaching. No way to know. Elias went back to the horses. The mare was dozing, head low. The stallion was still awake, still watching. I'm going to make you a promise, Elias said, crouching beside the wounded animal. If they come, if this goes the way it probably will, I'll make sure you don't suffer, quick and clean. That's the best I can offer. The stallion's eyes didn't change, didn't reflect fear or acceptance or anything Elias could name, just that steady, evaluating gaze that seemed to see past words to whatever sat behind them. But if we somehow get through this, Elias continued, if the universe decides to surprise us both, then we figure out what comes next together. Deal? The horse blinked once. Elias chose to interpret that as agreement. He settled back against the wall, gun in his lap, and watched the stars multiply overhead. The temperature kept dropping. Night in the desert was like that. All extremes, no middle ground. You cooked or you froze, and the transition happened too fast to adjust properly. Hours passed. Elias drifted in and out of something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't alertness either. His mind kept circling back to Sarah, to Grafton, to the moment when his life had split in two before and after. He'd spent 6 years avoiding that split, treating it like an injury that would heal if he just kept moving. But wounds didn't work that way. They either healed or they festered, and movement didn't determine which. Around midnight, Elias guessed based on star position, he heard it. Faint at first, barely distinguishable from wind over rock. Then clearer. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses, moving slow. They were coming. Elias was on his feet immediately, fatigue burned away by adrenaline. He moved to the canyon mouth, pressing against the wall where shadows were thickest. His gun was in his hand, hammer back. 5 shots. Make them count. The hoofbeats stopped just outside the canyon entrance. Close enough to hear, far enough to be invisible in the dark. Someone out there was thinking, calculating. Elias waited. Patience was a weapon too, and right now it was the only one he had in abundance. "Vorn," Calder's voice, carrying easily in the still air. "You in there?" Elias said nothing. "I know you are. Followed your trail straight to this hole. You picked decent ground, I'll give you that. Narrow approach. Good sight lines. You've done this before." Still, Elias remained silent. Let them guess, let them wonder. "Here's your situation," Calder continued. "You've got no water. That horse is dying. You're trapped in a canyon with one exit, and we're sitting on it. You can't wait us out, and you can't fight through us. So let's skip the part where you pretend you have options." Elias shifted position slightly, trying to gauge exactly where the voice was coming from. Left of center, maybe 15 yards out. Calder was staying mounted, staying mobile. Smart. "I'm going to make you an offer," Calder said. "And it's generous considering you pulled a gun on me. Leave the horse. Walk out. We let you go. You get to keep breathing. We get our property back. Everybody walks away." "That's not how it works," Elias said quietly, just loud enough to carry. "What's that?" Calder's voice sharpened. "Speak up." "I said that's not how it works." Louder now, but still not shouting. "You don't want the horse. If you wanted it, you wouldn't have wired it up and left it to die. This is about something else." Silence from outside. Elias had hit something true. "This is about you making a point," Elias continued. "About control. About making sure everyone knows you own everything in a day's ride. That horse stopped being property the second it became a lesson. And lessons don't take well to being interrupted." "You think you're smart," Calder said. The friendly tone was gone now, replaced by something colder. "You think you've got it figured out?" "I think you're going to come in here whether I give up the horse or not," Elias said. "Because letting me walk away sends the wrong message. Makes you look weak. And men like you can't afford to look weak, not out here where weakness gets you killed." More silence. Elias counted heartbeats. Got to 15 before Calder spoke again. "You're right," Calder said simply. "You're absolutely right. I am coming in there. And when I do, you're going to wish you'd taken the offer." "Probably," Elias agreed. "But wishes don't change what is." He heard movement outside. Low voices conferring. They were making a plan, which meant they weren't stupid. Stupid would have been easier. Elias moved back to where the horses were. The mare was fully awake now, ears flat, sensing the threat. The stallion had lifted its head, nostrils flared. Even wounded, even barely functional, it knew violence was coming. "They're going to try something clever," Elias told the horses. "Maybe send one man in as bait while the others find an angle. Maybe wait till dawn and use light against us. Maybe just rush the entrance and bet their numbers beat my aim." The stallion struggled to its feet. The effort looked like agony, but the horse made it upright. Standing on those ruined legs, swaying but upright. "What are you doing?" Elias asked. The horse moved toward the canyon entrance. Not fast, not graceful, but deliberate, like it had made a decision. "No," Elias said. "Absolutely not. Get back here." The stallion ignored him, kept moving forward, each step a negotiation with gravity and pain. It positioned itself in the canyon mouth, silhouetted against the lighter darkness of the open desert beyond. "You're going to get yourself killed," Elias hissed. "That's their target now." The horse didn't move, just stood there, blocking the entrance with its body. Outside, Elias heard surprise in the voices. They'd seen the horse. Were trying to figure out what it meant. A wounded animal standing in the kill zone like it had strategic value. "Rusk," Calder said, loud enough for Elias to hear. "Shoot the damn horse." "You said you wanted it back," Rusk replied. "That was before it made itself a barricade. Shoot it." Elias heard the hammer cock, heard Rusk's horse shift position, angling for a clear shot. The stallion didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there like standing meant something beyond survival. Elias made a choice. He moved fast, covering the distance to the canyon mouth in 4 strides, grabbed the stallion's mane and hauled it backward just as the shot cracked. The bullet hit rock where the horse's head had been, sparking orange in the dark. "You're insane," Elias told the horse. "Completely insane." Return fire came immediately. 2 shots, 3, aimed at where Elias's muzzle flash would have been if he'd fired back. But he hadn't, so the bullets hit stone and whined off into darkness. Elias dragged the stallion further back, putting rock between them and the shooters. "Cease fire!" Calder's voice cut through the noise. "You're wasting ammunition." The shooting stopped. Elias's ears rang in the sudden quiet. "That was your horse saving you, Vorn," Calder called out. "Won't happen twice." Elias didn't answer. He was checking the stallion over, looking for new wounds. The horse had somehow avoided getting shot, which seemed like either incredible luck or something else. Elias didn't believe much in luck. "New plan," Calder said. "We wait. No food, no water, no way out. Give it 24 hours, you'll be ready to deal. Give it 48, you'll be dead anyway, and we just walk in and take what's ours." "You've got the patience for that?" Elias asked. "I've got supplies and men to rotate watch. What have you got?" Fair question. Elias had a half-dead horse, an exhausted mare, and principles that were starting to look expensive. "I've got time to think about all my poor choices," Elias said. "That's worth something." Calder laughed. It sounded genuine, almost friendly. "You're an odd man, Vorn. In another situation I might even like you, but this situation is what it is." "Yeah," Elias said quietly. "It is." He heard the riders pull back, putting distance between themselves and the canyon mouth. Not leaving, just repositioning to somewhere they could watch and wait in comfort. Siege tactics. Effective, boring, and nearly impossible to counter without resources. Elias sat down heavily. The stallion stood beside him, close enough to touch. The mare watched both of them with the expression of someone witnessing bad decisions compound themselves. "We need water," Elias said aloud. "Without it, Calder's right. We're on a clock." The canyon offered no solutions. Rock and sand and the memory of water that might have flowed here centuries ago, but wasn't flowing now. Elias tried to think through options. Could they slip out after full dark? No, Calder would have sentries, and the mare couldn't move quiet enough. Fight through? 4 against 1, even with terrain advantage. Those were losing odds. Wait them out? With what water? The stallion lowered its head, nosing at Elias's empty canteen where it lay on the ground. The gesture looked almost accusatory. "I know," Elias said. "If I'd left you in the desert, I'd have water now, but I didn't, and here we are." The horse snorted. "You disagree? Fine. Tell me your plan. I'm open to suggestions." The stallion turned its head, looking deeper into the canyon, away from the entrance, into the darkness where the walls narrowed further. Its ears were forward, focused on something Elias couldn't see. "What?" Elias stood up, following the horse's gaze. "What are you—" Then he heard it, faint, almost subliminal. The sound of water moving over stone. Not much, not a river or even a stream, just the whisper of moisture in a place that shouldn't have any. "There's no water in here," Elias said, but he was already moving, following the sound deeper into the canyon. The stallion limped after him, the mare bringing up the rear, all three of them following that impossible whisper. The canyon bent sharply left, narrowing to shoulder width. Elias had to turn sideways to fit through, the horses pressing close behind. It was fully dark here, no starlight reaching this deep. Elias moved by feel, hands on rock, feet testing ground before committing weight. The sound of water grew clearer, definite now, not imagined. Elias's heart, which had been running on fumes and determination, found an extra gear. The canyon opened suddenly into a space maybe 20 feet across. And there, running down the far wall in a thin silver thread, was water, seeping from somewhere in the rock above, following gravity down to collect in a depression that might generously be called a pool. Not much, maybe 2 gallons total, but it was real. Elias stood there staring. The stallion pushed past him and went straight to the water, lowering its head to drink. The mare followed, both horses sipping carefully, like they couldn't quite believe it either. "How did you know?" Elias asked the stallion. The horse didn't answer, too busy drinking, but its ears flicked back toward Elias, acknowledging the question even if no answer was forthcoming. Elias waited until the horses had drunk their fill, then crouched and cupped his hands in the cold water. It tasted like minerals and stone and salvation. He drank slowly, letting his body adjust to the sudden influx. 3 handfuls, then he stopped, making sure there'd be enough for the horses later. He filled his canteen from the seep, watching water collect drop by drop. It would take time, but time was suddenly something they had more of. Not a lot more, but enough to change the immediate equation. This doesn't solve everything, Elias told the horses. We're still trapped. They're still out there. But it buys us options. The stallion had settled down near the water, close enough to guard it or drink again if needed. The mare positioned herself near the entrance to the small chamber, nervous but less panicked than before. Elias sat against the wall and let exhaustion catch up to his body. Now that immediate death by thirst was off the table, all the other ways he was broken demanded attention. His shoulder ached from the old bullet wound, aggravated by hauling the stallion around. His legs felt like someone had replaced the muscles with wire. His head pounded from dehydration that was only now beginning to ease. I need to think, he said to no one. Need to figure out how to turn this from a siege into something we can survive. The stallion's breathing had steadied. The water and rest were helping, buying the horse a reprieve from the immediate slide toward death. Not a cure. The leg wounds were still infected, still serious, but a pause in the decline. Elias closed his eyes and tried to think tactically. Calder had numbers and patience. Elias had terrain and apparently water. The canyon mouth was defensible, but also a trap. Anyone trying to leave would be exposed, silhouetted, easy to shoot. Unless... He opened his eyes, looking at the narrow passage they'd come through. The bend. The tight squeeze that forced single-file movement. An idea started forming, ugly and desperate, but maybe workable. They expect us to either stay put or try to break out, Elias said slowly. They don't expect us to invite them in. The mare's ears swiveled toward him. What if we make them come to us? Make them come through that passage where their numbers don't matter because they can't spread out? Elias stood up, following the thought. They'd be funneled, exposed, vulnerable, turn their advantage into a liability. The stallion lifted its head, watching him. But they're not stupid, Elias continued. Calder won't commit everyone. He'll send scouts first, test the approach. So we'd need bait. Something that makes them think we're vulnerable, desperate enough that they can take us easy. He looked at the horses, at the stallion specifically. No, Elias said immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not using you as bait. That's not happening. The horse held his gaze, that too intelligent look that seemed to suggest it had opinions about strategy that didn't align with Elias's objections. Don't look at me like that, Elias said. You can barely stand. Putting you in danger is the opposite of the point. The stallion snorted, managed to sound dismissive, which shouldn't have been possible for a horse, but somehow was. Elias ran his hands through his hair, tugging slightly. We need a better plan. Something that doesn't require sacrificing either of you or me. Think. He paced the small chamber, 3 steps in each direction, working through scenarios. Dawn would come in maybe 4 hours. Calder would probably wait for light, easier to see, easier to aim, easier to control the situation. That gave Elias a window to prepare. Traps, he said suddenly. If they come through that passage, we can't shoot all of them, but we can make it cost them. Make them hesitate, make mistakes. He went back through the narrow section, studying the walls, the floor, the angles, looking for anything that could be leveraged into an advantage. The rock was solid, old, unforgiving, but there were loose stones near the entrance, pieces that had spalled off over time, and higher up, an overhang that looked questionable. Elias spent the next 2 hours working. He stacked loose rock in specific positions, balanced carefully so that disturbance would bring them down. Not enough to kill anyone, but enough to spook horses, create noise, add chaos. He rigged his spare rope across the passage at ankle height, concealed under a thin layer of sand. Small things, nuisance-level obstacles, but they'd add up. The stallion watched him work, occasionally huffing what might have been approval or might have been skepticism. The mare mostly slept, conserving energy with the wisdom of an animal that understood the next day would be worse than this one. By the time Elias finished, his hands were bleeding from rockwork, and his body was threatening to shut down from exhaustion. But the canyon entrance was now something more than just a door. It was a gauntlet, small and crude, but better than nothing. He went back to the water, drank again, refilled his canteen. The seep was still producing, slower now but steady. Life was stubborn like that, finding ways to persist in places that should be dead. Here's what I think happens, Elias said to the horses. Dawn comes. Calder sends someone to scout, see if we're still alive. When that scout gets close, we let them see you. He gestured at the stallion. standing at the entrance, looking weak. They report back. Calder thinks we're vulnerable, decides to press, sends his men through that passage. The stallion's ears flicked forward. When they come through, they hit the rope, probably spook. Loose rocks fall, adds to confusion. In that chaos, I have maybe 3 seconds to fire before they can effectively return shots. 5 bullets, 4 men. I need to make those shots count. It was a terrible plan. Too many assumptions, too many things that could go wrong. But it was the plan they had, and doubt was luxury. The alternative is we wait for thirst to kill us or Calder to get impatient, Elias said. I've had better options before. I've also had worse. He settled against the wall one more time, gun in his lap, and watched the darkness outside start to thin. Morning was coming, inevitable as gravity. With it would come decisions that couldn't be unmade and consequences that wouldn't care about intentions. The stallion stood up as the first light touched the canyon walls. Moved to the entrance without prompting, taking position like it understood its role in this desperate gamble. The horse looked terrible, wounded, exhausted, legs trembling, but it stood there anyway. Last chance to back out, Elias said quietly. We could try waiting them out. Take our chances with time. The stallion didn't move. Right, Elias said. Forward it is. He positioned himself behind a rock outcrop with a clear view of the passage. 5 rounds in the cylinder, thumb on the hammer. His hands were steady despite everything. Muscle memory from a life he'd left behind, but apparently hadn't forgotten. The sun cleared the horizon, painting everything orange and gold. Beautiful, if you had time to appreciate that sort of thing. Elias didn't. He was watching the desert beyond the canyon mouth, waiting for shapes to resolve into men with guns and intentions. They came just after full sunrise. Not all 4, just one rider, approaching slow and careful. Scouting, like Elias had predicted. The rider stopped 50 yards out, studying the canyon entrance, studying the stallion, standing alone and vulnerable. Elias could almost hear the thought process. Horse is still alive. Means they have water somehow. But the horse looks half dead. Means they're still in bad shape. Worth reporting. The scout turned his horse and rode back. Disappeared into the desert shimmer. Here we go, Elias muttered. They waited. 10 minutes. 15. The stallion stood motionless, conserving energy. Elias's finger rested outside the trigger guard, patient. The mare, deeper in the canyon, nickered softly. Then 4 riders appeared, all of them this time. Calder in the lead, Rusk beside him, the 2 others flanking. They stopped at the canyon entrance, close enough that Elias could see faces clearly. Calder looked tired but determined. Rusk looked eager, hungry for resolution. The other 2 looked like men following orders without much investment in the outcome. Vorn, Calder called. Time's up. We're coming in. You can surrender or we can drag your corpse out. Your choice. Elias said nothing. Let silence be the answer. Have it your way, Calder said. He gestured to one of the men. Cole, your point. Careful through that entrance. The man called Cole dismounted, drew his gun, and approached the canyon mouth. The stallion didn't move. Cole studied it, probably wondering if the horse was even alive or just standing through rigor mortis and spite. He stepped into the canyon, past the stallion. 3 steps. 4. His boot hit the concealed rope, went down hard, gun flying from his hand. Before he could recover, Elias fired. The shot took Cole in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He went down shouting. The noise triggered everything else. Loose rocks Elias had positioned started falling. The other 3 men rushed the entrance, trying to help Cole or secure position or both. Rusk's horse spooked at the falling rocks, reared. The stallion moved then, lunged at the nearest rider with teeth bared, not causing real damage but creating chaos. Elias fired again, caught one of the other men in the leg. The man dropped, cursing. 3 rounds left. 2 men still operational. Calder was shouting orders, trying to organize the chaos. But the narrow passage and falling debris made organization impossible. He fired twice toward where Elias was positioned, but the angles were wrong, bullets hitting rock 10 feet to the left. Elias shifted position, using the smoke and confusion. Fired his 3rd shot. Missed. The bullet sparked off stone behind Rusk's head. 2 rounds remaining. Pull back, Calder was yelling. Pull back, regroup. The 2 wounded men scrambled backward, helped by Rusk. Calder fired twice more, covering their retreat. Neither shot particularly close to Elias. Then they were out of the canyon, dragging injured men and spooked horses, leaving nothing behind except dust and blood and the echo of gunfire. The stallion stood in the entrance, breathing hard, legs locked. It looked like it might collapse any second, but somehow didn't. Elias lowered his gun, hands shaking now with aftermath adrenaline. 2 rounds left. 2 wounded enemies, maybe 3 if you counted the man he'd shot initially but hadn't killed. The math had shifted, but not enough. Calder still had numbers, still had patience, still had the ultimate advantage of being outside with supplies and options. That bought us maybe an hour, Elias said to the stallion, before they try something else. The horse finally moved, limping back to where the water was. Elias followed, legs unsteady. He drank again, hands cupped, water spilling through his fingers. Outside, he could hear Calder yelling at his men. The words weren't clear, but the tone was anger, frustration, determination. This had stopped being about a horse or property. It was personal now, and personal made men dangerous in specific ways. We hurt them, Elias said. That's something. But hurting someone and stopping them are different things. The stallion drank water, then stood with its head low, sides heaving. The effort of the fight had cost it something important. Elias could see it in the way the horse held itself, the way its legs trembled more than before. I'm sorry, Elias said quietly. This wasn't supposed to fall on you. You were supposed to be the thing I was saving, not the thing I was risking. The horse lifted its head slightly, meeting his eyes. And in that look, Elias saw something he recognized, because he'd felt it himself. The understanding that sometimes survival meant accepting costs you couldn't calculate in advance. Outside the canyon, Calder was making new plans. Inside, Elias had 2 bullets and a dying horse and stubbornness that might or might not be enough. The sun climbed higher. The day grew hot. And somewhere in the math between desperation and determination, the next move was taking shape. The silence after gunfire always felt wrong to Elias, like the world was holding its breath and waiting for permission to start making sense again. He sat with his back against cold stone, gun still in his hand, and listened to Calder's men reorganize themselves outside the canyon. Someone was groaning, probably Cole, the one Elias had shot first. The sound carried in the still air steady and pained and human in ways that made Elias's jaw tight. He'd shot men before. Back in Grafton, then later during the 6 years of riding alone when avoiding trouble sometimes meant creating worse trouble. Never got easier. People who said it did were either lying or broken in ways that didn't show on the surface. The stallion had collapsed near the water, finally giving in to exhaustion. Its sides heaved with each breath, ribs showing through hide that was dark with sweat and blood. The horse had bought them time with that lunge at Rusk's mount, disrupted the attack just enough to shift odds. But the cost was written in every trembling muscle. You keep saving me, Elias said quietly. That's supposed to work the other direction. The mare stood guard near the narrow passage, ears swiveling constantly. She was smarter than both of them, probably. Smart enough to know this situation had gone from bad to something that didn't have a good word yet. Outside, Calder's voice rose above the groaning. Wrap it tight. Stop the bleeding. Cole, shut up, or I'll give you something real to complain about. The groaning didn't stop, but it got quieter. Muffled, like someone had shoved cloth in Cole's mouth, or he'd bitten down on something. Vorn! Calder shouted toward the canyon. You hear me? Elias stayed quiet. Let Calder wonder. You shot 2 of my men. That changes things. You understand what I'm saying? This isn't about the horse anymore. This is about blood. Still, Elias said nothing. Words right now would just fill space that needed to stay empty. Let Calder understand he was talking to someone who'd stopped negotiating. I've got wounded men who need a doctor, Calder continued, which means I don't have time for patience anymore. So here's what happens next. I'm going to kill that horse first. Put a bullet in it from out here, where you can't do anything about it. Let you watch. Then I'm going to starve you out or smoke you out or dig you out, whichever comes first. And when I get my hands on you, what happens next won't be quick. Elias looked at the stallion. The horse's eyes were closed now, breathing slower. Resting or dying, hard to tell the difference at this point. He's bluffing, Elias said quietly. He can't shoot you from out there without coming in closer, and getting closer means exposing himself to return fire. The stallion's ear flicked slightly, listening even in exhaustion. But he's also not entirely bluffing, Elias admitted, because eventually he'll figure out an angle or wait long enough that his confidence comes back. And when it does, we're in trouble. He checked his revolver again. 2 rounds. 2 chances to make something impossible happen. The math was getting worse by the hour. Elias stood up, every joint protesting. He needed to think, needed to find some angle Calder hadn't considered. The canyon was defensible, but also a coffin. The water kept them alive, but didn't solve the fundamental problem of being outnumbered and trapped. He walked to the narrow passage, staying in shadow, and peered out toward where Calder's men had withdrawn. He could see them maybe 100 yards out, 3 figures moving around a fourth who was sitting or lying down. Cole, probably, getting his shoulder wrapped. The other man Elias had shot in the leg was up and moving, so that wound wasn't severe enough to take him out of the fight. 3 operational men outside, 1 wounded but mobile, 1 badly hurt. Against Elias, with 2 bullets and a mostly dead horse. The odds were clear, and they weren't good. Movement caught his eye. One of Calder's men was climbing, working his way up the rocks to the east of the canyon mouth, trying to get elevation, get an angle that would let him shoot down into the canyon without exposing himself to return fire. Smart. Exactly what Elias would do in Calder's position. "We've got a problem," Elias called back to the horses. "They're going high." The mare shifted nervously. The stallion didn't respond, too exhausted or too hurt to care about problems that were still developing. Elias moved back through the passage to where his saddlebags lay. He dug through them, looking for anything useful. Spare ammunition, 23 rounds for a gun that currently held 2, which would be helpful if he had time to reload under fire. A box of matches, half empty. Some dried meat that was more leather than food. A steel needle and thread. Nothing that solved the immediate problem of a man getting high ground. He went back to the entrance, watching the climber's progress. The man was maybe 30 feet up now, moving carefully but steadily. In another few minutes, he'd have position, and then every time Elias or the horses moved near the entrance, they'd be exposed to fire from above. "I could take the shot," Elias muttered. "Use one of my 2 bullets. Maybe hit him, maybe not. Or save the rounds for when Calder comes through that passage." Both options were bad. That was becoming a theme. The climber reached a ledge and settled in, checking his rifle. Long gun, better range and accuracy than Elias's revolver. The math kept getting worse. Then the stallion made a sound. Not quite a whinny, more like a grunt of effort. Elias turned to see the horse struggling to its feet again, legs shaking so badly it looked like standing was taking every ounce of will the animal had left. "Stay down," Elias said. "You've done enough." The horse ignored him, took 1 step, then another, moving toward the canyon entrance with determination that didn't make sense given its condition. "What are you doing?" Elias moved to intercept, but the stallion pushed past him with surprising force. "You can't even walk straight. Where do you think you're going?" The horse reached the entrance and stood there, fully visible to anyone watching, including the man on the ledge, who was raising his rifle, sighting down the barrel. Elias's hand was moving before his brain finished processing. Drew his revolver, aimed high toward the ledge. The man saw the motion, started to shift his aim from horse to human. Elias fired. The bullet sparked off rock 3 feet to the left of the climber. Miss. 1 round remaining. But the near miss did what it needed to, made the man flinch back, lose his position, scramble for better cover. Bought seconds, nothing more. The stallion turned and limped back into the canyon. Mission apparently accomplished. Whatever mission that had been. "You just cost us a bullet," Elias said. His voice came out harsh, edged with fear that had nowhere else to go. "We had 2 shots left. Now we have 1. 1 bullet against 3 men and whatever plan Calder's working on." The horse reached the water and stood there, breathing hard. Didn't look apologetic. Didn't look like it regretted anything. Elias holstered his gun, hands shaking now. The adrenaline spike was fading, leaving behind the crash. His body wanted to shut down, find a corner and sleep for 16 hours. His mind was racing, trying to calculate odds that kept coming up 0. "I don't know what you want from me," Elias said to the stallion. "I don't know what you think I can do with 1 bullet and bad options." The horse lowered its head to drink. The mare watched both of them with an expression that might have been judgment or might have been sympathy. Hard to tell with horses, and Elias was too tired to care about the distinction. He sat down hard, back against the wall. The canyon felt smaller now, more like a cell. The sun was fully up, heat building, turning the stone into an oven. By midday, it would be unbearable. By night, it would be freezing again. The desert's usual routine, indifferent to whatever human drama was playing out. I had a teacher once, Elias said aloud. Talking to horses again, talking to himself, didn't matter anymore. Back when I was learning to shoot, before Grafton, before the badge. His name was Samuel Kerr, and he was the best shot I ever saw. Could hit a playing card at 50 yards, moving target at 70. I asked him once what his secret was. The stallion's ear flicked toward him. He said the secret was knowing when not to shoot. Said most men died because they fired when they shouldn't have, wasted rounds on shots that didn't matter. He told me to count my bullets like they were heartbeats. Make each one count for something real, or don't pull the trigger at all. Elias pulled his revolver, looked at it. 1 round in the cylinder, 5 empty chambers. I've got 1 heartbeat left in this thing, he said. So whatever happens next, it better count. Outside, he heard Calder organizing his men. The voices were clearer now, less cautious. They were getting ready for something. Rusk, Calder was saying. Take the high position Cole was trying for. Get up there and keep eyes on that entrance. Anything moves, you shoot it. What about the horse? Rusk's voice, young and eager. Especially the horse. That animal's caused enough trouble. Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear exactly, but the understanding that time had run out. They were coming, and this time they weren't going to be cautious about it. He stood up, checked the narrow passage. The traps he'd set earlier were mostly spent. Rocks fallen, rope visible now, nothing left that would slow anyone down. The passage was just a passage again, and anyone coming through it would be exposed for maybe 3 seconds before reaching cover. 3 seconds. 1 bullet. The math was clear. The stallion had moved away from the water, positioning itself near the chamber entrance. The horse couldn't possibly fight anymore, but it was standing anyway, like standing itself was defiance. You should rest, Elias said. Save your strength for whatever comes after. The horse didn't move. There might not be an after, Elias continued. You understand that? This might be where it ends. All of it. You, me, whatever stubborn thing we've been doing here. Still the horse stood, waiting, ready for something Elias couldn't see yet. Outside, Rusk was climbing. Elias could hear boots on stone, the scrape of someone hauling themselves up, getting position, getting angle. In another minute or two, he'd be set, and then the canyon entrance would be covered by rifle fire. Calder's voice came again. When you're in position, signal. Then me and Jackson are coming through, fast and hard, no hesitation. We clear that passage, secure the space, end this. Jackson must have been the name of the man who wasn't wounded. 2 men coming through, one with rifle support from above. Professional tactics, the kind that worked because they'd worked before. Elias moved to the passage entrance, pressed himself against the wall. From here he could see the canyon mouth, could track anyone coming through. But he'd also be exposed to fire from Rusk's position once the shooting started. 1 bullet, 2 targets at minimum, 3 if he counted Rusk. The math didn't work any way he calculated it. The stallion moved. Not toward the entrance, toward Elias. The horse pushed against his shoulder with its head, not hard but insistent, like it was trying to communicate something. What? Elias asked. What do you want? The horse pushed again, then turned and moved toward the back of the chamber, away from the entrance, away from the fight that was about to happen. It looked back at Elias, waiting. You want me to run? Elias said. There's nowhere to run to. This canyon ends. Dead end, no exit. The stallion huffed, impatient, moved further back into shadows where the chamber narrowed, still looking at Elias, still waiting. I haven't checked back there, Elias admitted. Didn't seem relevant since we had water here, but you think... He stopped, started moving toward where the stallion stood. The chamber did narrow, pinching down to what looked like a crack in the wall. Maybe a foot wide at its widest, disappearing into darkness. Elias had dismissed it earlier as nothing, just where the water came from. But the horse was standing there like it meant something more. This doesn't go anywhere, Elias said, but he was already moving closer, already trying to peer into the darkness beyond. It's just a crack. Even if it does go somewhere we can't fit through, you definitely can't. The stallion pushed against him again, insistent. Outside, Rusk's voice called down. In position! Go! Calder shouted. Elias heard boots hitting sand moving fast. They were coming. Were He looked at the narrow crack, at the stallion, at the mare who was backing toward them both with ears flat. No time to think, only time to choose. If this doesn't work, we're trapped worse than before, Elias said. The horse pushed past him, forcing its body into the crack. Somehow, impossibly, it fit. The passage was wider than it looked from outside, or the horse was more flexible than physics should allow. Either way, the stallion was moving into darkness, disappearing. The mare followed without hesitation, squeezing through. Elias heard voices in the passage now, close, Calder and Jackson, moving fast like they'd planned. He holstered his gun, grabbed his saddlebags, and pushed into the crack. The rock caught his shoulders, held him for a terrible moment where he thought he'd gotten stuck. Then he twisted, angled different, and slid through. The darkness swallowed him. Behind, he heard Calder burst into the chamber. Where? Calder's voice, confused. They were just here, search it. There's nothing here, Jackson said. Just rock and water. No exit. Check everything. They didn't vanish. Elias stayed frozen in the dark, barely breathing. The crack continued beyond where he stood, widening slightly. He could hear the horses ahead, their breathing, their movement. He started forward, feeling his way blind. Behind him, maybe 10 feet back through stone, he heard Calder cursing. Heard him kicking things, looking for answers. Then Rusk's voice echoing down from outside. Calder! Got movement on the far side of the canyon. They got through somehow. That was impossible. They were still in the passage, moving through stone, but Rusk was seeing something, and that something was pulling Calder back out of the chamber. How? Calder was demanding. How did they? Don't know, but they're moving fast, heading northeast. After them! Boots running, voices fading, then silence. Elias kept moving through the darkness, one hand on stone wall, the other stretched forward. The passage twisted, narrowed, opened slightly. He had no idea where it went, whether it would dead end or collapse or open onto a cliff. Just kept moving because stopping meant answering questions he couldn't afford to think about. Time became elastic in the dark. Could have been 5 minutes or 50. His sense of direction was gone, replaced by simple forward momentum. The horses kept moving ahead, somehow navigating by senses Elias didn't have. Then light. Faint at first, barely visible, growing stronger. The passage widened, became tall enough to stand upright. The light resolved into a crack in the ceiling, showing sky. Elias emerged into a narrow ravine, maybe 4 feet wide, walls rising 40 feet on either side. The horses stood in dusty sunlight, looking back at him like they'd been waiting. How did you know? Elias asked the stallion. How did you know that passage went through? The horse didn't answer, just turned and started moving down the ravine, limping badly but moving. Elias followed, legs unsteady. His mind was trying to process what had just happened. They'd escaped through solid rock somehow, and Rusk had seen them on the far side of the canyon, which was impossible unless... He stopped, looked back at where they'd emerged. The crack in the stone was nearly invisible from this angle, hidden by shadow and the way the rock folded. But water was seeping from it, that same thin trickle they'd found inside. Following it backward with his eyes, Elias could trace where it probably went. Down through the ravine, around the canyon, emerging somewhere on the far side where Rusk would have seen it. And Calder, seeing water movement, seeing shadows, had assumed it was them, had taken his men and ridden off chasing ghosts. You bought us time, Elias said to the stallion. Got us out and sent them the wrong direction. That's... He stopped, because adequate words didn't exist. The horse had done something impossible with nothing but instinct and stubbornness. The ravine opened onto a broader valley. No sign of Calder's men, no dust trails, nothing but empty land and the sun climbing toward noon. Elias checked his bearings. They were northeast of the canyon, just like Rusk had said, but by maybe 2 miles. Calder would figure out the mistake eventually, but eventually might be hours from now. The stallion stopped, legs finally giving up. The horse collapsed slowly, carefully, lowering itself to the ground with the control of something that knew falling wrong would be final. It lay there breathing hard, sides heaving, and Elias could see that whatever reserve the animal had been running on was finally completely spent. Easy, Elias said, crouching beside the horse. You did it. We're out. The stallion's eyes were half closed, glassy. Its legs twitched, muscles firing randomly. The wounds had reopened during the escape, fresh blood soaking through the dried crust. "I need to get you to a town," Elias said. "Get you a real doctor, real medicine. But the nearest settlement is—" He didn't know. He'd been avoiding towns so long he'd stopped tracking where they were. Somewhere north, probably. Maybe west. Far enough that getting there on foot with a dying horse wasn't realistic. The mare stood nearby, watching. She looked exhausted but functional. Could carry Elias if he left the stallion. Could get him somewhere with resources, with help, with options. That was the smart choice. Leave the horse, save himself, come back with help if it made sense. It was the same calculation he'd refused to make in the desert 3 days ago, except now the stakes were higher and the odds worse. "I'm not leaving you," Elias said quietly. "I know that's stupid. I know it doesn't make sense. But I'm not doing it." The horse's ear flicked slightly. "We're going to rest here for an hour," Elias continued. "Give you time to recover what you can. Then we move. Slow. As slow as you need. We find water, find shelter, figure out next steps. Together." He sat beside the stallion, back against a rock that still held morning coolness. The mare settled nearby, head low. All three of them used up, running on nothing but the biological imperative to keep breathing. Elias's hand found his gun. 1 bullet left. He took out the other rounds from his saddlebag, started loading the empty chambers. The action was mechanical, soothing. Click, rotate. 6 rounds total now. Better odds, but not by much. "I keep thinking about Sarah," he said aloud. "About what she said when she left. That I didn't know when to walk away. She was right. I don't. Never have." The stallion's breathing had slowed, steadied. Not healthy, but less like immediate dying. "The thing she didn't understand," Elias continued, "was that walking away isn't the hard part. It's the easiest thing in the world. I did it for 6 years. Walked away from everything that mattered until nothing mattered anymore. What's hard is stopping, staying, standing your ground when everything smart says to go." He looked at the horse. The animal's eyes were open now, watching him. "You stopped me from walking away," Elias said. "In that desert, with that wire cutting into you, you could have just died quiet. But you didn't. You made a sound. And I stopped. And everything that came after came from that." The sun climbed higher. The valley was quiet except for wind and the occasional call of a bird Elias couldn't identify. Peaceful, almost. Like violence was something that happened elsewhere to different people. But Calder was still out there. Would realize his mistake eventually, backtrack, pick up their actual trail. This wasn't over, just delayed. And delays only mattered if you used them to change the situation. "We need a plan," Elias said. "Need to think past the next hour." The stallion closed its eyes, either resting or conserving energy. The mare flicked flies with her tail, patient. Elias tried to think tactically. They were out of the canyon, which was good. They had some distance from Calder, which was better. But the fundamental problem remained: 3 armed men with resources and determination versus Elias with a wounded horse and 6 bullets. He needed to change the equation somehow, even the odds, or shift the terrain, or find leverage that didn't exist yet. Something. The horse made a sound, low and rumbling. Not distress. Something else. Elias looked over to see the stallion's ears pointed east, focused on something. What is it? Then he heard it too. Faint, distant, voices carrying on the wind. Not close, but not far enough either. Elias moved to higher ground, staying low, using rocks for cover. Peered out toward where the sound originated. 3 riders, maybe a mile out, moving slow, searching. Not Calder's group. The angles were wrong. The timing didn't fit. But riders this far into empty country usually meant problems of one kind or another. He watched for a minute, trying to get a read on them. Their body language was wrong for hostiles. Not alert enough, not hunting. More like traveling. Like they were passing through rather than looking for something specific. One of the riders stopped, dismounted, knelt to check the ground. Tracker, probably. Good enough to spot signs most people would miss. The rider stood, pointed northeast, away from where Elias and the horses were hidden. Said something to the others. They all turned and rode that direction. Elias waited until they were out of sight, then moved back to the horses. "We've got company in the area," he said. "Not Calder's men, someone else. Could be nothing, could be another problem. Either way, we need to stay quiet and keep moving when you're able." The stallion lifted its head, testing its legs with small movements. Still weak, still hurting, but computing whether standing was possible. "Not yet," Elias said. "Rest more. We've got time." The horse settled back down. Elias checked his water situation, canteen still mostly full from the canyon seep, enough for the horses and himself if they were careful. Food was another matter. His supplies were basically gone, and hunting required time and noise they couldn't spare. "One problem at a time," he muttered. He spent the next hour doing maintenance work. Cleaned his gun, reloaded properly, checked the cylinder action. Examined the mare's hooves, found a stone wedged in her left front, worked it out. Tried to clean the stallion's wounds with water and cloth torn from his shirt, knowing it wasn't enough but doing it anyway because not trying felt worse. The sun reached its peak, making everything brutal. Elias rigged shade with his bedroll, angling it to cover the stallion's head and neck. Small comforts, barely adequate, but the horse seemed to appreciate them. Its breathing stayed steady, less labored than before. "I'm going to give you a name," Elias said. "Can't keep calling you the horse or you. Doesn't feel right." The stallion's ear swiveled toward him. "I was thinking Trace," Elias continued, "for the way you read things before they happen, the way you knew about that passage, about the water. Like you can trace patterns the rest of us miss." The horse blinked slowly. "Trace," Elias repeated. "Unless you hate it, in which case you should speak up now." Silence, which Elias chose to interpret as acceptance. "All right then. Trace it is." Saying the name made something shift. The horse stopped being a burden or a responsibility or a symbol of Elias's bad choices. Started being something else. Something that didn't have a good word but felt more like partnership than ownership. Around mid-afternoon, Trace tried standing again. This time the legs held, shaky but functional. The horse took 3 careful steps, testing weight distribution, finding what worked. Not good, not healthy, but mobile. "That'll do," Elias said. "We'll go slow. Stop when you need to stop. No rush." They moved out, heading north based on sun position and general sense. Elias led the mare. Trace followed at his own pace. Progress was measured in yards rather than miles, but progress was progress. The land gradually changed, becoming slightly less barren. Patches of scrub grass appeared, then small stands of something that might have been juniper. Signs of water somewhere, even if not immediate. They walked until the sun started dropping, maybe 4 miles total, then found a spot with decent cover, rocks arranged in a rough semicircle, providing windbreak and concealment. Elias set up camp without fire, just bedrolls and what little remained of their supplies. Trace lowered himself down carefully, still favoring the wounded legs but managing the descent without falling. Small victory, but victories were scarce enough that small ones counted. "Tomorrow we find water," Elias said. "Find better ground. Maybe find a settlement if we're lucky." The mare was grazing on the sparse grass, making the most of whatever nutrients existed. Elias chewed on jerky that had turned to leather, washing it down with careful sips of water. His stomach complained but didn't revolt. That was something. Night came on fast, stars multiplying overhead. The temperature dropped, but not as severely as in the canyon. Elias wrapped his coat tight and watched the darkness for shapes that shouldn't be there. Around midnight he heard them again. Riders, distant. Maybe the same 3 from earlier, maybe others. Hard to tell in the dark. He stayed still, hand on his gun, waiting to see if the sounds got closer or faded. They faded. Whoever it was wasn't tracking them, just traveling the same general country. Coincidence, probably. But Elias had learned not to trust coincidence. He dozed in fits, never fully sleeping. Every sound jerked him awake. Wind on rock, the mare shifting position, his own breathing loud in his ears. Trace slept deeper, exhausted enough that even danger wasn't sufficient to override the need for rest. Dawn came gray and cold. Elias stood up stiff, every muscle complaining. He checked the horses, checked the horizon, checked his gun. Same routine, different day, same problems waiting for resolution. Trace stood on the first try this time. Better. The legs were still wounded, still needed real treatment, but the night's rest had helped. Sometimes survival was just a series of incremental improvements that added up to not dead yet. They moved out, still heading north, still gambling that civilization existed somewhere ahead. The land kept improving slightly. More vegetation, more signs of water somewhere in the general vicinity. Birds appeared, then disappeared, following patterns Elias couldn't predict. Around mid-morning, they found a stream, narrow, maybe 6 inches deep, but running clear over stones. All three of them drank like they'd forgotten water was possible. Elias refilled his canteen, soaked his shirt, put the wet cloth over Trace's wounds. The horse stood patient, accepting the care with the dignity of something that had learned to tolerate help. "We're going to make it," Elias said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it or was just saying what needed to be said. "One way or another, we're going to make it." Trace looked at him with those two intelligent eyes, and Elias got the sense the horse was reserving judgment on that claim. They followed the stream northeast. Water meant people eventually, or at least the possibility of people. The smart money was still on finding nothing but more empty country, but smart money had been wrong before. The sun climbed, the land rolled, and behind them, somewhere in the vast stretches of dust and rock and scrub, Calder was figuring out his mistake and adjusting course. The math still wasn't good, but it was better than it had been in the canyon, better than it had been in the desert, and better, however small the margin, was worth taking. Elias kept walking, leading the mare, Trace following at his own pace. Three figures moving through country that didn't care whether they lived or died, heading towards something that might be help or might be nothing, but heading forward either way. The stream led them to a road, which was the first sign of organized human activity Elias had seen in days. Not much of a road, two-wheel ruts worn into hardpack, weeds growing down the middle, but roads meant destinations, and destinations meant choices. Elias stood at the intersection of stream and road, studying both directions. East showed nothing but more empty country dissolving into heat shimmer. West curved around a low hill and disappeared. No dust trails either way. No indication that anyone had used this road recently or ever would again. "Civilization is supposedly west," Elias said to the horses. "Or it was, last time I paid attention to maps. But that was 6 years and a different version of me ago." Trace stood with head low, conserving energy. The horse's legs were holding up better than Elias had expected, but better was relative. The wounds were still infected, still serious. Every hour that passed without real medical treatment increased the odds that better wouldn't matter. The mare nickered softly, impatient. She wanted to be somewhere that wasn't here, doing something that wasn't this. Elias sympathized. "West it is," he said, making the choice, because standing still wasn't helping anyone. They followed the road as it curved around the hill and opened onto broader valley. Here the land showed actual signs of use. Fences in various states of repair, a few head of cattle visible in the distance, irrigation ditches that held water in the recent past, if not the present. People existed here, or had existed, which was as close to promising as the situation had been in a while. They walked for another hour before Elias spotted the buildings. Small cluster, maybe 5 or 6 structures total, sitting where the road widened into something approximating a town square. Most of the buildings looked functional in the way that frontier construction tended to, built for purpose, not appearance, maintained just enough to keep the weather out. Elias stopped, studying the settlement from a distance. No signs of activity he could see from here, but it was mid-afternoon on what looked like a workday. People could be inside, could be out working somewhere, could have abandoned the place entirely for all he knew. "Could be friendly," Elias said. "Could be hostile. Could be owned by someone who knows Calder. No way to know without getting closer." Trace shifted weight, favoring the right foreleg. The horse needed rest and treatment more than it needed caution, which meant the decision was already made. They approached slowly, Elias leading with one hand near his gun. As they got closer, details resolved. The largest building had a sign that said Mercantile and Post in faded paint. Another building showed a hitching post and watering trough, probably a saloon or boarding house. The others were harder to identify without getting closer. A woman emerged from the Mercantile carrying a crate. She stopped when she saw Elias and the horses, set the crate down, and watched their approach with the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned to assess strangers before committing to hospitality. Elias stopped 10 yards out, keeping distance that didn't force immediate choices. "Afternoon," he said. "Afternoon," the woman replied. She was maybe 50, sun-weathered, with gray hair pulled back practical. Her hands stayed visible but ready, the kind of posture that suggested a weapon wasn't far if needed. You look like you've had a time of it. That's accurate, Elias said. Looking for water for the horses and maybe supplies if you're selling. We sell to people who buy, the woman said, assuming they're buying legal and not looking for trouble. Just passing through, Elias said. No trouble intended. The woman's eyes moved from Elias to the horses, lingering on Trace. Her expression shifted, sharpening. That horse needs a veterinarian. I know. Nearest one is 3 days north in Cooperton. If that animal has 3 days left in it. She stepped closer, examining Trace from a professional distance. Wire wounds, deliberate. Someone did that on purpose. Elias said nothing. You steal that horse from someone who liked teaching lessons? The woman asked. Other way around, Elias said. Found him dying in the desert, cut him loose. And whoever did the teaching didn't appreciate the interruption. It wasn't a question. Something like that. The woman studied Elias for a long moment, making calculations he couldn't read. Then she gestured toward the building with the hitching post. Bring your animals around back. There's a stable with clean straw and a pump for water. I'll get my medical kit. You do veterinary work? Elias asked. I do whatever needs doing, the woman said. Learned animal doctoring from my father, who learned it from his father. It's not fancy, but it's kept livestock alive in country where letting them die means starving. She didn't wait for response, just went back into the mercantile. Elias led the horses around back like she'd directed. The stable was small but well maintained, 3 stalls with decent ventilation and clean hay. He got both animals inside, gave them water from the pump. Trace drank long and deep, sides heaving. The woman returned carrying a wooden box and a bucket. She set both down, rolled up her sleeves, and approached Trace slowly. The horse watched her with wary eyes, but didn't spook. Easy, she said quietly. Let's see what we're working with here. She examined the wounds carefully, hands gentle, but thorough. Her expression got darker as she worked. After a minute, she stood back, shaking her head. Infections set in deep, she said. Another day or two and it would have been too late. As it is, this is going to hurt him, and there's no guarantee he comes through it. What do you need to do? Elias asked. Clean the wounds properly, which means cutting away dead tissue. Drain the infection, pack it with sulfur powder, and hope his body can fight off what's left. She looked at Elias. He's going to fight me. These wounds hurt already, and what I need to do will hurt worse. I'll need you to hold him steady. I can do that. The woman opened her kit, pulling out implements that looked more like instruments of torture than medical tools. What's your name? Elias Vorn. Rebecca Stanton. This is my town, what there is of it. Population 7 on a good day, 3 on a bad one. She was preparing supplies as she talked, laying out bandages and bottles on a clean cloth. Before we start, you should know Calder Hale rode through here 2 days ago. Asked if I'd seen anyone matching your description. Elias's hand moved toward his gun automatically. Relax, Rebecca said. I told him no because at the time it was true. But if he comes back, I won't lie for you. Won't put myself or mine at risk for a stranger. Fair enough? Elias said. Good. Now hold his head. What followed was brutal. Rebecca worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, but efficiency didn't make it gentle. She cut away necrotic tissue, drained pus that smelled like death, flushed the wounds with something that made Trace scream, an awful sound that echoed in the stable. Elias held the horse's head, talking nonsense words that were supposed to be soothing, but probably weren't. The mare watched from her stall, ears flat, disapproving of the whole process. Rebecca worked for maybe 20 minutes, though it felt longer. When she finally stepped back, Trace's legs were freshly bandaged with clean white cloth, and the horse was trembling with exhaustion and pain. That's the best I can do, Rebecca said, washing her hands in the bucket. The rest is up to him. He needs rest, water, and grain if he can stomach it. No travel for at least 3 days, maybe 5. I can't stay that long, Elias said. Then you'll be leaving without him, Rebecca said bluntly, because if you put weight on those legs before they start healing, he'll die. Simple as that. Elias looked at Trace. The horse had lowered itself carefully to the straw, lying down with a groan that sounded too human. Its eyes were half closed, breathing steady but shallow. 3 days minimum, Rebecca repeated. And that's optimistic. Calder will figure out I came this direction, Elias said. He'll backtrack, ask questions, find this place eventually. Probably, Rebecca agreed. So you've got a choice. Stay and risk confrontation, or leave and let the horse die. Neither option's great, but those are what you've got. She stood up, gathering her supplies. I'll bring grain and medicine for the infection. You can sleep in the stable or the boarding house, your choice. Meals are extra if you want them. Payments due before you leave, and I take cash or trade. I don't have much, Elias said. Then we'll figure something out, Rebecca said. I've been poor enough times to know how it works. She left, taking her medical kit. Elias sat down hard in the straw next to Trace, feeling the weight of the past days settle on him. The horse's eyes opened slightly, regarding him. You heard her, Elias said quietly. 3 days minimum, which means I need to figure out how to deal with Calder in the next 72 hours, or we both lose. Trace blinked slowly, too tired to offer opinions even if horses could. Rebecca returned with the bucket of grain and several bottles of medicine. She showed Elias how to dress the wounds, how much medicine to give and when, how to check for signs the infection was winning. Her instructions were clear, practical, delivered without emotion. One more thing, she said as she was leaving. There's 3 men staying at the boarding house. Came through this morning, heading east. They're not Calder's men, but they're armed and asking questions about strangers in the area. What kind of questions? Elias asked. The kind that suggests they're looking for someone specific. Didn't say who, and I didn't ask. Rebecca paused at the stable door. Might be nothing to do with you. Might be everything. Thought you should know. She left Elias alone with that information and its implications. He spent the next hour caring for the horses, following Rebecca's instructions. Fed them grain, cleaned out the stalls, checked the mare for injuries he might have missed. Busy work that kept his hands occupied while his mind worked through problems that didn't have obvious solutions. 3 armed men asking about strangers. Could be bounty hunters. Could be law. Could be anyone. Add that to Calder eventually tracking him here, and the math kept getting worse. Evening came on. Elias heard voices outside, people moving around the settlement. The sound of normal life happening, people going about business that didn't involve running or hiding or calculating how many bullets it took to solve problems. He stayed in the stable until full dark, then ventured out. The mercantile was closed, lights off. The boarding house showed lamplight through windows, voices audible but not distinct. Other buildings were dark and quiet. Elias made his way to the boarding house, moving quiet from habit. Through the window, he could see the interior, common room with tables, small bar in the corner, stairs leading up. 3 men sat at one table, talking low. They looked professional, the kind of professional that came from experience with violence and its consequences. One of them looked up suddenly, eyes moving to the window. Elias stepped back into shadow, hand on his gun, waited to see if the man would come investigate. After a moment, the man said something to his companions, and they all laughed. False alarm, probably saw his own reflection. Elias moved back to the stable, heart hammering. Whatever those men were doing here, getting their attention seemed like a bad plan. He settled into the straw near Trace, gun in his lap, and tried to think strategically. 3 days before the horse could travel. Call it 2 days before Calder tracked them here. That left maybe 48 hours to figure out how to handle multiple threats with 6 bullets and bad options. Sleep came in fragments, disrupted by every sound. Elias jerked awake a dozen times, each time reaching for his gun before remembering where he was. Trace slept deeper, the medication Rebecca had given him probably helping. The horse's breathing stayed steady, which seemed like a good sign. Morning arrived gray and cool. Elias checked Trace's wounds, changing bandages like Rebecca had shown him. The flesh looked marginally better, less angry, less swollen. Small improvement, but he'd take it. He gave both horses grain and water, then made his way to the mercantile. Rebecca was behind the counter, sorting through a delivery of canned goods. Your horse make it through the night? She asked without looking up. Yeah, Elias said. Wounds look a bit better. That's the medicine working. Keep up the treatment. He's got a fighting chance. She finished sorting, then turned to face him. Those 3 men left an hour ago, headed east like they planned. Paid their bill, didn't cause trouble. They say anything about what they were looking for? One of them mentioned a gang that hit a payroll shipment near Cooperton, killed 2 guards. They're tracking the gang, trying to recover the money. Rebecca's expression was neutral. Seemed like honest work, assuming they were telling the truth. Could be, Elias said. Sounded like law or private security, which meant probably not a direct threat. Probably. What do you need? Rebecca asked. Supplies, food, ammunition if you have it, medicine for the horse to take when we leave. Show me what you've got for trade, Rebecca said. Elias laid out what he could spare. His spare shirt, a decent knife, some rope that wasn't critical. Rebecca examined each item with the practiced eye of someone who'd been trading goods longer than Elias had been alive. This covers food and horse medicine, she said. Ammunition's going to cost more. What else do you need? Elias asked. Dos, Rebecca considered. That stable needs mucking out, repairs to the back wall where the wood's rotting. Do that work. I'll call it even for a box of cartridges. Deal, Elias said. He spent the rest of the morning working, mucked out the stable, hauled the waste to the compost pile behind the buildings, started on the wall repairs, pulling rotten boards and replacing them with lumber Rebecca provided. Physical work felt good after days of running and hiding, gave his body something to do that wasn't survival. Trace watched him work, occasionally huffing what might have been commentary. The horse was more alert today, which seemed promising. Still couldn't stand without obvious pain, but the eyes were clearer, more present. Around noon, Elias took a break. Sat in the straw eating bread and cheese Rebecca had brought, drinking water that tasted clean and cold, and nothing like fear. Simple pleasures that would have been invisible a week ago, but now felt significant. I've been thinking, he said to Trace, about what happens when we leave here, assuming Calder doesn't show up first. The horse's ear swiveled toward him. We can't keep running forever, Elias continued. Eventually he'll catch up, or someone else will, or we'll just run out of places to run to, so maybe running isn't the answer anymore. Trace blinked slowly. Problem is, I don't know what the alternative looks like, Elias admitted. I spent 6 years perfecting the art of not being anywhere long enough to matter. Now I've got you, and you can't exactly vanish into the desert when things get complicated. The horse huffed, managing to sound judgmental. Right. You're the one who kept us alive in the canyon, Elias said. You've earned the right to judge my strategic thinking. He finished eating, went back to work on the wall. The afternoon passed in the rhythm of physical labor. Measure, cut, nail, repeat. By evening, the wall was solid, the stable looking better than it probably had in years. Rebecca inspected his work, nodded approval. You do decent carpentry. Learned it in Grafton, Elias said. Before I was a deputy, worked construction summers. Figured it was good to know a trade that didn't involve shooting people. Practical, Rebecca said. She handed him a box of cartridges, .45 caliber, which is what that revolver takes, unless I'm mistaken. You're not mistaken, Elias said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rebecca said. Calder Hale's men were spotted south of here this morning. Word came through from a ranch family passing through. They're asking questions, tracking someone. Pretty sure that someone is you. Elias's stomach dropped. How far south? Maybe 8 miles, moving this direction. Rebecca's expression was matter of fact. I'd say you've got till tomorrow evening before they reach town, assuming they're being thorough about their search. The horse can't travel yet, Elias said. I know. Rebecca crossed her arms. Which puts you in a position. You can leave without him and probably stay ahead of Calder, or you can stay and make a stand. But if you stay and bring violence to my town, we're going to have a problem. I understand, Elias said. Do you? Rebecca's voice sharpened. I've got 7 people depending on this settlement staying peaceful. I won't let one stranger's trouble destroy what we've built here. I wouldn't ask you to, Elias said. If it comes to fighting, I'll take it away from here. Somewhere Calder can find me without involving anyone else. Rebecca studied him for a long moment. You mean that? I do. She nodded slowly. All right. But understand, if shooting starts in my town, I'll end it myself. I don't care who's right or wrong. I'll put down whoever's disturbing the peace. That clear? Crystal, Elias said. Rebecca left him with that warning. Elias went back to the stable, mind working through new calculations. Tomorrow evening meant maybe 24 hours. Trace needed at least another day of rest. Maybe 2. The math didn't work no matter how he tried to balance it. He sat down next to the horse, exhaustion catching up. I can leave you here, he said quietly. Rebecca seems decent. She'd probably keep you safe, find you a good home when you're healed. And I could lead Calder away. Deal with him somewhere that doesn't risk anyone else. Trace opened one eye, regarding him. That's the smart play, Elias continued. The play that gives you the best chance. You didn't ask for any of this. Didn't ask me to cut that wire or drag you through the desert or get you mixed up in my problems. You deserve better than bleeding out because I can't let go of a bad decision. The horse continued to watch him. But if I leave you, Elias said slowly, then what was the point? I stopped in that desert because you made a sound. Because something in me couldn't ride past. And everything since then, the canyon, the escape, getting here, it all came from that moment. Leaving now would make all of it meaningless. Trace's other eye opened. Both eyes focused on Elias with that unnerving intelligence. So here's what I'm thinking, Elias said. I stay. I give you every hour I can to heal. And when Calder shows up, I meet him somewhere away from town. Make it quick. Make it final, one way or another. If I win, we ride out together. If I lose, Rebecca finds you a better situation than traveling with a dead man. The horse huffed softly. Might have been agreement, might have been gas. Elias chose to interpret it favorably. He spent that night in the stable, dozing lightly, jerking awake at sounds that turned out to be nothing. Twice he thought he heard riders approaching and grabbed his gun, only to have silence prove he was wrong. Paranoia and exhaustion were making companions that argued constantly. Morning came. Elias changed Trace's bandages, pleased to see the wounds were definitely improving. Still infected, still serious, but trending right instead of wrong. The horse stood on its own this time, legs trembling but holding weight. That's progress, Elias said. He led Trace out of the stable for the first time since arriving, letting the horse walk slowly around the building. The stallion's gait was wrong, limping and careful, but it was movement. In another day, maybe two, actual travel might be possible. They were making the second circuit when Elias heard horses approaching. Multiple riders, coming from the south at a steady pace. His hand went to his gun automatically. Rebecca emerged from the mercantile, saw his posture, looked toward the sound. Her expression hardened. Get your horse inside, she said quietly. Now. Elias led Trace back into the stable, positioned himself where he could see the road but wasn't immediately visible. Drew his gun, checked the cylinder. 6 rounds, loaded and ready. 4 riders came into view, Calder in the lead, Rusk beside him, 2 others Elias didn't recognize. They rode into the small square and stopped, surveying the settlement with the confidence of men used to owning whatever space they occupied. Calder spotted Rebecca, dismounted, approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ma'am, he said, we spoke a few days ago. I'm looking for someone, wondered if he might have passed through since then. Lots of people pass through, Rebecca said. Her voice was neutral, giving nothing. This one would have been traveling with horses. Maybe looked like he'd had a rough time of it, possibly wounded. Calder's smile widened. Man by the name of Elias Vorn. Rebecca met his eyes without flinching. Haven't seen anyone matching that description. Elias watched from the stable, heart hammering. She was lying for him, risking herself despite her warning about not getting involved. Calder studied Rebecca, clearly trying to gauge whether she was telling the truth. You sure about that? Because we tracked him to that stream east of here, and the stream led straight to your road. Then maybe he kept following the stream instead of taking the road, Rebecca said. Water's easier tracking than hardpack. Maybe, Calder agreed. But I'm a thorough man. Mind if we look around? I do mind, Rebecca said. This is private property. You need a reason to search it, and maybe isn't a reason. Rusk shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his gun. Calder held up a hand, stopping him. We don't want trouble, Calder said. Just looking for what's ours. A horse was stolen from us, and the man who took it needs to answer for that. If he comes through, I'll let him know you're looking, Rebecca said. Her tone suggested the conversation was over. Calder's expression went cold. You're protecting him. I'm protecting my property from men I don't know making accusations I can't verify, Rebecca said. There's a difference. The tension stretched. Elias's finger moved to the trigger. If Calder drew on Rebecca, this was going to get messy fast. Then someone else spoke. There a problem here? Elias shifted position, saw 3 men approaching from the direction of the boarding house. The same 3 who'd been asking about strangers yesterday. They were armed, hands near weapons, watching Calder's group with professional wariness. No problem, Calder said. Just asking questions. Looked like more than questions from where we're standing, one of the men said. Ma'am, these men bothering you? Rebecca looked at the newcomers, then at Calder. They were just leaving. Calder stared at her for a long moment, clearly calculating. 3 armed men he didn't know, plus whatever surprises the town might hold, against his 4. The odds were close enough that violence became expensive instead of easy. We'll be back, Calder said quietly. Count on it. He remounted, gestured to his men. They turned and rode out, heading north. Elias watched until they were out of sight, then emerged from the stable. The 3 men turned to look at him. One of them, older with gray at his temples, smiled slightly. You must be Vorn, he said. Elias's gun was still in his hand. And you are? Marcus Webb. These are my associates, Finn and Cole. The man gestured to his companions. We're tracking a gang that hit a payroll near Cooperton, killed 2 guards in the process. When we heard about a man being hunted by Calder Hale, we got curious. Why? Elias asked. Because Calder Hale has a reputation, Webb said. And men with his reputation don't usually chase down horse thieves with this much determination. Makes us wonder if there's more to the story. Rebecca stepped forward. Whatever this is, take it away from my town. Fair enough, Webb agreed. He looked at Elias. We'll be heading north in an hour. You're welcome to ride with us if you want safety in numbers. Calder's less likely to make a move against 5 than against 1. My horse can't travel yet, Elias said. Then you've got a decision to make, Webb said. Calder knows you're here now. He'll be back, probably with more men. You can either leave the horse and come with us, or stay and take your chances. I'm staying, Elias said. Webb nodded, unsurprised. Figured you might say that. Offer stands if you change your mind. We'll be at the boarding house for another hour. The 3 men walked away, leaving Elias and Rebecca standing in the square. You lied for me, Elias said. I lied for my town, Rebecca corrected. Having Calder tear the place apart looking for you would have been worse than a simple lie. But that was a one-time favor. Next time he comes, I'm telling the truth. Understood, Elias said. And I'll make sure there isn't a next time. I'll leave tonight, lead him away. Your horse isn't ready. I know, Elias said, but staying makes me your problem, and you've done enough already. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. You're a stubborn fool. I've been told that before, Elias admitted. Your horse needs 2 more days minimum, Rebecca said. Leaving tonight will probably kill him. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay in that stable and keep quiet. I'm going to spread word that you left heading west. And if Calder comes back, you're going to have the good sense to stay hidden until he moves on. That's risky for you, Elias said. Everything's risky, Rebecca said. The question is whether the risk has purpose. Keeping that horse alive seems like it might. She turned toward the mercantile. 2 more days. After that, you're gone, whether the horse is ready or not. Deal? Deal, Elias said. He spent the rest of that day in the stable, staying quiet like Rebecca had instructed. Trace continued improving, standing easier, eating better. The horse's eyes were clearer, more alert. Small victories adding up to maybe survives. That night, lying in the straw with his gun within reach, Elias thought about Webb's offer. Safety in numbers made sense tactically, but it also meant leaving Trace, which meant undoing everything the past week had built. I could still go, he said quietly to the horse. Save myself. Let you recover here. That's the smart choice. Trace's eyes were closed, breathing steady, resting or sleeping or just conserving energy. But smart and right aren't always the same thing, Elias continued. Sometimes the right thing looks completely stupid from every angle except the one that matters. The horse didn't respond. Didn't need to. Some decisions made themselves if you stopped arguing with them. 2 more days, Rebecca had said. 2 days to heal, to prepare, to figure out how to handle what came next. Elias closed his eyes and tried to rest. Tomorrow would bring its own problems. Tonight, at least, they were still alive and together. That was something. Maybe enough. The 2 days Rebecca had given him moved like syrup, slow and thick and impossible to speed up no matter how much Elias wanted them over. He spent the hours working around the settlement, doing repairs Rebecca pointed out, earning his keep while staying mostly out of sight. Trace improved steadily, the wounds closing cleaner, the limp becoming less pronounced. By the afternoon of the second day, The horse could walk almost normally, bearing weight without the trembling that had marked every movement before. "You're tougher than you have any right to be," Elias said, checking the bandages one more time. The flesh underneath was pink and healing, no signs of infection spreading. Rebecca's treatment had worked, buying them time they shouldn't have had. Trace huffed, ears swiveling toward the road. The horse had been doing that all morning, tracking sounds Elias couldn't hear yet, reading the world before it arrived. That instinct had saved them in the canyon. Elias had learned to pay attention when Trace paid attention. "You hear something?" Elias asked. The horse's posture shifted, muscles tensing slightly. Not panic, just readiness. Elias moved to where he could see the road without being immediately visible. Nothing yet, but Trace wasn't wrong about these things. Something was coming. 10 minutes later, dust appeared on the southern horizon. Single rider, moving at a steady pace. Not Calder's group, wrong approach, wrong speed. Elias stayed concealed anyway, hand near his gun, watching. The rider resolved into Marcus Webb, the man who'd offered him safety in numbers 2 days ago. Webb rode into the square, dismounted, looked directly at the stable like he knew Elias was there. "Vorn?" Webb called out. "Need to talk." Elias emerged slowly, keeping distance. "Thought you headed north." "We did," Webb said. "Got as far as the Morrison Ranch, heard some things, came back." His expression was serious, lacking the easy confidence from before. "Calder's gathering men. Word is he's put out a bounty, $500 for whoever brings you in. Dead or alive, but preferably alive so he can handle it personal." 500 was serious money out here. The kind of money that turned strangers into hunters and made quiet settlements dangerous. "How many men?" Elias asked. 8, maybe 10 by now. He's been recruiting from every settlement within 2 days' ride. Webb crossed his arms. "You need to leave. Tonight. That horse ready to travel?" "Close enough," Elias said. "Then stop being stubborn and go. Calder's going to come through here with enough men that standing your ground stops being brave and starts being suicide." Rebecca emerged from the mercantile, apparently having heard the conversation. "He's right. You've had your 2 days. Time to move." Elias looked at Trace, at the stable, at the small settlement that had given them shelter when it would have been easier to turn them away. "If I run, Calder follows. Keeps following until he catches up or I lead him somewhere with people who can't defend themselves. And then it's the same problem in a different place." "So what's your alternative?" Webb asked. "Make a stand here, get yourself killed, and probably take some of Rebecca's people with you?" "No," Elias said. "I leave, but I don't run. I find ground that favors 1 against 10, and I end it." Webb stared at him. "That's not bravery. That's just slow suicide with extra steps." "Maybe," Elias admitted, "but I've been running for 6 years. Running from Grafton, from choices, from anything that might make me stop and face what I was becoming. And you know what running got me? Nothing. Emptiness. 6 years of riding through empty country, becoming more empty myself." He gestured to Trace. "Then this horse showed up. And something about cutting that wire, about choosing to stop instead of keep riding, it changed the equation. Made me remember there's a difference between survival and living. And living means sometimes you stop running and you face what's chasing you." "That's a fine philosophy," Webb said. "Doesn't change the math. 10 men with guns versus you with, 6 bullets and determination?" "6 bullets and knowledge of the terrain," Elias corrected, "and a horse that reads trouble before it happens. And the advantage of being the one who picks the ground." Rebecca shook her head. "This is foolish." "Probably," Elias agreed. "Most worthwhile things are. But I'm done running. If Calder wants me that bad, he can have me. Just not on his terms." Webb was quiet for a moment, studying Elias with the expression of someone running calculations. "Where are you planning this last stand?" "There's a pass about 6 miles north. Narrow, rocky, steep walls. I spotted it 2 days ago when I was hauling supplies. Calder would have to come through single file, can't use his numbers effectively." Elias had been thinking about that pass since seeing it, running scenarios in his head. "If I can get there first, fortify position, I've got a chance." "A small chance," Webb said. "Better than no chance." Webb looked at Rebecca, then back at Elias. "My men and I could help, even the odds." "No," Elias said immediately. "This isn't your fight. You've got your own job, your own problems. Don't make mine yours." "We're already involved," Webb pointed out. We stood between you and Calder 2 days ago. He knows our faces, so the question isn't whether we're involved, it's whether we see it through or walk away and let you die alone. Walk away, Elias said. I mean that. This started with me making a choice in the desert. It should end with me dealing with the consequences. Noble, Webb said. Also stupid. You're outgunned 10 to 1. Pride's not worth dying over. It's not about pride, Elias said quietly. It's about understanding that some things matter more than surviving. That horse mattered enough to stop for, enough to fight for, enough to risk everything for. And if I run now, if I let Calder chase me until I'm too tired or too slow or just unlucky, then what was the point? I might as well have kept riding past that wire-bound animal and saved myself the trouble. Webb studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. You're either the bravest fool I've met or the most foolish brave man. Haven't decided which. Can be both, Elias said. Yeah, Webb agreed. Suppose it can. He moved toward his horse, mounted up. We'll ride north, stay out of your way. But if shooting starts and you're still alive when we hear it, we're coming. Can't promise we'll make it in time, but we'll try. Don't, Elias said. Please. Not your choice, Webb said simply. He turned his horse, paused. That pass you mentioned? There's a rock shelf on the east side, about 15 feet up. Good cover, better angle. Might be worth positioning there instead of the bottom. I'll keep that in mind, Elias said. Webb nodded and rode out, heading north. Elias watched him disappear, then turned to find Rebecca watching him. You're determined to get yourself killed, she said. I'm determined to stop running, Elias corrected. The getting killed part is optional, and I'm planning to avoid it if possible. Calder's not going to give you that option, Rebecca said. He's coming for blood. His pride got damaged when you escaped that canyon, shot his men. Men like him don't forgive that. I know, Elias said. Rebecca sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. Come inside, I've got something for you. He followed her into the mercantile. She went behind the counter, pulled out a Winchester rifle, checked the action, handed it to him. This is worth more than carpentry work, Elias said. Consider it payment for the entertainment, Rebecca said dryly. You're either going to die heroically or survive improbably, and either way it'll make a good story. Figured that's worth a rifle. I can't. You can and you will, Rebecca cut him off. That revolver's fine for close work, but you're talking about a defensive position in a pass. You need range. The rifle gives you that. Elias took the weapon, feeling its weight. Good balance, well-maintained, sighted properly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rebecca said. Save it for if you survive. She pulled out a box of ammunition. 40 rounds. Make them count. He loaded the rifle, pocketed the extra ammunition. The weight felt right, familiar. He'd carried a Winchester in Grafton, back when being a deputy meant protecting things instead of running from them. One more thing, Rebecca said. She disappeared into the back room, returned with a canteen and a bundle wrapped in cloth. Food and water for 2 days, in case you need to wait them out. I'm not planning to wait, Elias said. Plans change, Rebecca said. Take it anyway. He did. The supplies went into his saddlebag along with everything else he'd accumulated, the borrowed weight of other people's generosity, given despite knowing he might not live to repay it. I'll leave after dark, Elias said. Give myself time to reach that pass and prepare before Calder's group arrives. Sensible, Rebecca said, for someone about to do something completely insensible. Elias spent the remaining hours preparing, cleaned both weapons thoroughly, loaded them carefully, checked his ammunition count. 40 rifle rounds plus 6 in the revolver gave him 46 chances to solve a problem that required 10 solutions minimum. The math was still bad, but less catastrophically bad than before. Trace watched him work with those intelligent eyes, occasionally huffing commentary that Elias chose to interpret as support rather than judgment. You don't have to come, Elias said to the horse. Could leave you here with Rebecca, let you recover somewhere safe. This next part's going to be dangerous, and you've already done more than anyone had a right to ask. The horse's ears flicked forward, focused on Elias. That's what I thought, Elias said. Stubborn doesn't even begin to cover it. The mare nickered from her stall, probably offering her own opinion about the collective intelligence being displayed. She was the smart one, really. Knew enough to stay out of trouble that didn't concern her. Evening came on gradual, the light fading from gold to amber to purple. Elias saddled both horses, working by feel in the dimness. His hands knew the motions, had done them 10,000 times over 6 years of solitary travel. But this felt different somehow. The weight of intention, maybe. The understanding that this wasn't just another departure, another anonymous exit from another forgettable place. This was choosing forward despite knowing the cost. Rebecca appeared as he was finishing, carrying a lantern. "Road's clear. Calder hasn't been spotted since this morning, but that doesn't mean he's not out there." "I know," Elias said. "You sure about this?" Rebecca asked. "Because there's no shame in choosing survival over principle. Nobody remembers the brave dead, they just remember the dead part." "Some people remember," Elias said quietly. "There was a deputy in Grafton. Name was Thomas Beck. He'd been wearing that badge for 20 years, and for 20 years he did it right. Stood up when standing up mattered, even when it wasn't convenient or profitable. When the Garrick brothers came through, Thomas wanted to fight. The sheriff overruled him, told him to stand down. Thomas did because he followed orders even when he disagreed with them. And it ate at him. I could see it. The shame of letting wrong happen because fighting it wasn't authorized." Elias adjusted the saddle, checking the cinch. "Thomas died a year later. Heart failure, the doctor said. But I think it was shame that killed him. The accumulated weight of standing down when he should have stood up. And when I left Grafton, when I started running, I told myself I was different, that I'd stood up, done the right thing, paid the price. But really, I was just running from the same shame Thomas died from. The shame of knowing you could make a choice that matters and choosing not to." "So this is about redemption," Rebecca said. "This is about stopping," Elias corrected. "Everything else is just what happens after you stop running." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped forward, handed him something, a small leather pouch. "Sulfur powder and clean bandages, in case your horse's wounds open up again." Elias took it, throat tight. "I'll bring it back." "You better," Rebecca said. "And the rifle, too. I want that Winchester back in the same condition I gave it to you." "I'll do my best." "Your best better be good enough," Rebecca said. Then softer. "Ride safe, Elias Vorn. Try not to be a fool." "I'll try," Elias said. "But I'm not making promises." He led the horses out of the stable, mounted the mare, and started north. Trace followed without hesitation, limping only slightly now, moving with the determination of something that had decided forward was the only direction that mattered. The settlement disappeared behind them as night settled in completely. Stars emerged bright and cold and indifferent to whatever drama was playing out beneath them. Elias rode by their light, following the road until it gave way to open country, then cutting northwest toward where memory said the pass should be. The land rose gradually, rock replacing scrub, elevation buying cooler air and different sounds. An owl called somewhere to the east. Small animals scattered from the horse's approach, invisible but audible. The normal sounds of desert night, undisturbed by human violence or its consequences. They reached the pass around midnight. Elias dismounted, studying the terrain by starlight and feel. The pass was maybe 30 yards long, narrowing to 12 feet at its tightest point. Walls rose 40 feet on either side, smooth stone that wouldn't give purchase to climbers. One way in, one way out, just like he'd remembered. And there on the east wall, visible now that he knew to look for it, was the shelf Webb had mentioned. 15 feet up, accessible via a narrow chimney crack in the stone. Good cover, elevated position, clear sight lines down the length of the pass. Perfect, except perfect was relative when you were still outnumbered 5-1. Elias spent the next 2 hours preparing. Led the horses through to the far side of the pass, hobbled them in a small depression where they'd be out of the line of fire. Gathered loose rocks, positioned them on the shelf to use as improvised projectiles. Filled his canteen from a seep he found in the rock, noting its location in case this turned into a siege. Then he climbed to the shelf, settled in with the rifle, and waited for dawn. The stone was cold against his back. The Winchester rested across his knees, loaded and ready. His revolver sat within easy reach. 46 bullets against 10 men. Terrible odds. Except odds only mattered if you let them. "I used to think survival was the point," Elias said quietly to the darkness. "That staying alive meant winning. But survival's just moving forward without dying. It's not the same as living. Living means standing for something, means accepting that some things matter more than your own continued existence." The stars wheeled overhead, marking time's passage. Elias dozed in fragments, jerking awake at sounds that turned out to be wind or animals or his own mind playing tricks. Each time he woke, he checked the pass entrance, checked his weapons, reminded himself of the plan. When they came through, he'd have maybe 3 seconds of clear shooting before they could scatter or return effective fire. 3 seconds to make 10 shots count. After that, it would be chaos. Moving targets, incoming fire, terrain working for and against both sides simultaneously. The key was that first volley, making it devastating enough to change the psychological equation, turn hunters into survivors, make them question whether this prize was worth the cost. Dawn came slow, painting the pass walls orange and red. Elias watched the entrance, rifle ready. His hands were steady, despite everything. Muscle memory from Grafton, from the years before running, from some part of himself that remembered how to do this. They appeared an hour after sunrise. Not all at once, scouts first, 2 riders moving cautiously into the pass entrance, checking for ambush, for traps, for anything that suggested this was more complicated than it looked. Elias stayed motionless on the shelf, controlling his breathing. Let them come. Let them commit. The scouts rode through the narrow section, head swiveling, checking the walls. They missed the shelf entirely. It was positioned wrong for casual observation, hidden by the way the rock folded. They emerged on the far side, conferred. One of them rode back. 5 minutes later, the main group appeared. Calder in the lead, Rusk beside him, 8 more men behind. 10 total, just like Webb had said. They rode in 2 abreast where the pass allowed it, single file where it didn't, confident, expecting maybe some resistance, but nothing they couldn't handle through superior numbers. Elias waited. Let them get halfway through. Let them commit to the narrow section where turning around would be difficult and retreating would mean exposing themselves completely. Then he stood up on the shelf, rifle to shoulder, and fired. The first shot took Calder's horse in the chest. Intentional choice. The horse dropped, throwing Calder forward, creating instant chaos. The second shot caught one of the rear riders in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The third missed, sparking off stone behind Rusk's head. Then they were scattering, shouting, trying to control panicked horses and return fire simultaneously. Bullets sparked off the shelf's edge. Too low, wrong angle. Elias dropped behind cover, worked the Winchester's action, came back up shooting. 4th shot hit a man in the leg. 5th caught someone's horse, adding to the chaos. 6th shot missed. 7th found meat, dropping a rider. The pass was full of noise and smoke and confusion. Horses screaming, men cursing, gunfire echoing off stone walls and multiplying until it sounded like 20 shooters instead of 1. Elias dropped behind cover again, reloaded. His hands moved automatic, feeding rounds into the Winchester without conscious thought. The rifle held 15, and he'd fired 7. 8 left, plus what he had in reserve. Return fire was getting more organized now, bullets finding better angles. 1 round hit close enough to spray rock chips against Elias's face, stinging but not damaging. He shifted position on the shelf, came up in a different spot, fired 3 times fast. The shots were less accurate, meant to suppress rather than kill, to keep the chaos going. One might have hit someone, hard to tell through the smoke. Then Calder's voice cut through, loud and commanding. Fall back! Out of the pass! The group retreated, dragging wounded, leaving 2 horses dead or dying in the narrow section. They pulled back to the entrance, taking cover behind rocks, regrouping. Elias counted casualties. 2 men definitely down and not getting back up. 3 wounded but mobile. 5 still operational, including Calder and Rusk, plus whatever psychological damage the ambush had done. That was harder to quantify, but no less real. The mathematics had shifted, not enough to call it victory, but enough to matter. He reloaded again, this time taking his time, being thorough. Checked his ammunition, 19 rounds left for the rifle, 6 in the revolver, 25 total, against 5 men who were now much more cautious than before. Vorn, Calder's voice echoed up from the entrance. That was clever. Got to admit, didn't expect you to have the stones to make a stand. Elias said nothing. Let Calder wonder. But here's your problem, Calder continued. You're trapped up there, can't leave without exposing yourself. Can't wait us out because we've got supplies and reinforcements coming. So all you've done is delay the inevitable. Maybe, Elias called back. Or maybe you're down 5 men and starting to question whether this is worth it. Oh, it's worth it, Calder said. You made it personal when you shot my men in that canyon. Made it more personal when you ran. and now you've made it permanent. So yeah, it's worth whatever it costs. $500, Elias said. That's what you're paying for me, right? Bounty's good for dead or alive, but you're down to 5 men, and 500 split 5 ways is 100 each. Is $100 worth dying for? Silence from below. Elias could almost hear the calculation happening, men doing math that didn't add up the way it had an hour ago. Don't listen to him, Calder said. We finish this. The bounty's mine to distribute. You'll all get your share. If we survive to collect it, someone else said. Younger voice, uncertain. We will, Calder said. Rusk, can you get an angle on that shelf from the north wall? Maybe, Rusk said. Be exposed climbing, though. Do it, Calder ordered. The rest of you covering fire when I give the word. Keep his head down while Rusk climbs. Elias processed the plan. They'd try to flank him, get multiple angles, make the shelf untenable. Standard tactics, and effective if they executed properly. He shifted position, found where he could watch both the pass entrance and the north wall. Rusk was moving, starting the climb. The man was careful, but not particularly skilled. Too much weight on his arms, not enough on his legs, making the ascent slow. Now, Calder shouted. 4 guns opened up simultaneously, firing at the shelf. Bullets sparked everywhere, forcing Elias flat against the stone. He couldn't return fire without exposing himself to overwhelming volume, but Rusk's climbing had slowed even more, the gunfire making him flinch with each echo. Fear was making him cautious, and caution was making him slow. Elias counted seconds. Let the covering fire continue. Let Rusk get higher, more committed. Then he rolled right, came up in a position they weren't expecting, and fired once. The shot took Rusk in the side. Not fatal, probably, but the impact made him lose his grip. He fell 15 feet, hit the ground hard, screamed. The covering fire stopped, men reacting to Rusk's fall instead of maintaining suppression. Elias used the gap to fire 3 more times, fast and wild, not aiming so much as creating chaos. Someone cried out. Another hit. Another casualty. The numbers kept shifting. Pull back, Calder was yelling. Get Rusk out of there. 2 men broke cover, ran to where Rusk had fallen. Elias could have shot them, had the angle, had the time. But something stopped him. They were trying to save their wounded, not press the attack. Shooting them now felt different than shooting them in combat. He let them grab Rusk and drag him back to cover. The distinction mattered, even if he couldn't articulate exactly why. The pass went quiet again. Just wind and the sound of wounded men trying not to make noise. Elias reloaded. 11 rounds left in the rifle now, 6 in the revolver. 17 total. Calder, Elias called out. How many men have you lost now? How many more are you willing to sacrifice? As many as it takes, Calder shot back. But his voice had changed. Less confident, more desperate. The sound of someone whose plan wasn't working and who knew it. You can't win this, Elias said. Even if you eventually get me, the cost isn't worth it. Walk away, find easier money. Can't do that, Calder said. You know I can't. I walk away from this. I look weak. Word spreads. 6 months from now, every drifter with a gun thinks they can challenge me. I can't afford that. So this is about reputation, Elias said. This is about survival, Calder corrected. Same as you. We're not different, Vorn. We both do what we have to do to stay alive in country that kills most people who try. We're completely different, Elias said. I stopped for a dying horse. You're the one who wired it up to die in the first place. That's not the same survival. That horse needed discipline, Calder said. It was a lesson. It was cruelty disguised as authority, Elias said. And the fact you can't tell the difference is why we're different. Movement at the pass entrance. Elias brought the rifle up, ready. But it wasn't an attack. It was one of Calder's men standing, hands visible, clearly not looking for a fight. I'm done, the man called out. This ain't worth dying for. I'm walking away. You walk away, you're dead, Calder said. Maybe, the man agreed, but I'll die somewhere that isn't here. Better odds. He started backing toward his horse, movements careful but determined. Anyone else? Calder's voice was cold. Anyone else want to show their cowardice? 2 more men stood. Didn't say anything, just moved toward their horses. Calder let them go. Shooting his own men would have destroyed whatever authority he had left. That left Calder, and 1 other, down from 10. The math had completely reversed. Looks like your survival strategy has some holes in it, Elias called down. Shut up, Calder snarled. Then, to his remaining man, You staying? I'm staying, the man said. Older voice, steady, someone who'd made his choice and would live or die with it. Elias respected that, even while knowing he might have to kill the man for it. The sun climbed higher, baking the pass. Elias sipped water from his canteen, making it last. Calder and his man stayed behind their cover, probably doing the same calculation. Wait or attack, both options bad in different ways. Then Trace made a sound from beyond the pass. Not distress, something else. Elias looked back, saw the horse standing at the depression's edge, ears forward, looking past him toward the entrance. Warning. Something was happening. Elias turned back to see Calder emerging from cover, walking into the open. No gun drawn, hands visible. The ultimate gamble, forcing a confrontation through sheer audacity. This is stupid, Elias called down. Probably, Calder agreed, but I'm tired of hiding. So here's what happens. You come down from that shelf, we settle this face to face. Or you shoot me from up there and prove you're no different than me. That's not, Elias started. You said we're different, Calder interrupted. Said I'm cruel and you're righteous. So prove it. Come down here and face me fair. It was manipulation, obviously, an attempt to negate Elias's tactical advantage through appeals to honor. The smart play was to stay on the shelf, maintain position, wait Calder out. But Elias found himself moving anyway, climbing down from the shelf, rifle in hand. Because Calder was right about one thing. Proving you're different sometimes meant doing the harder thing instead of the smarter thing. He reached the ground, walked toward where Calder stood in the middle of the pass. 30 feet separated them. Close enough to talk, far enough that drawing and firing was still risky. Just you and me now, Calder said. Way it should have been from the start. Didn't have to be at all, Elias said. You could have let the horse go, could have written it off and moved on. And you could have kept riding, Calder countered. Could have left that animal to die and saved yourself all this trouble. But you stopped. Why? Elias thought about that. Because stopping was the right thing to do. Even knowing it might get you killed? Especially knowing that, Elias said. Doing the right thing when it's safe and easy isn't virtue, it's just convenience. Calder smiled slightly. You really believe that? I do. Then you're going to die believing it, Calder said. His hand moved toward his gun. Elias was faster, not by much. Calder was good, practiced, professional. But Elias had spent 6 years riding alone through country where being slow meant being dead. His revolver cleared leather and came level before Calder's did. Both men fired simultaneously. Calder's shot went wide, rushed. Elias's didn't. Calder staggered backward, hand going to his chest where red was spreading. He looked surprised, like this outcome hadn't been in his calculations. You're fast, he said. Then he fell. The remaining man stepped out from cover, gun drawn but not aimed. He looked at Calder's body, then at Elias. You planning to shoot me too? The man asked. Only if you make me, Elias said. The man holstered his gun slowly. Calder was my employer, not my friend. He's dead. The job's over. I got no quarrel with you. Then leave, Elias said. The man nodded, walked to his horse, mounted up, paused before riding out. That horse you fought for? Better be worth it. He is, Elias said. The man rode away, heading south. Elias stood in the pass, surrounded by the aftermath of violence, dead horses, blood on stone, gun smoke clearing in the morning air. His hands were shaking now with adrenaline crash, but he was alive. They were alive. He walked back through the pass to where Trace stood waiting. The horse had watched everything, those intelligent eyes tracking the fight, computing odds the way horses shouldn't be able to. We did it, Elias said. His voice came out rough, unsteady. It's over. Trace pushed his head against Elias's chest, and the weight of that simple gesture broke something loose. 6 years of running, 6 years of choosing empty over complicated, 6 years of surviving without living. All of it came pouring out in a moment of contact that shouldn't have mattered, but somehow was everything. I stopped, Elias said quietly. In that desert, I stopped, and everything changed. The horse huffed, breath warm against his shirt. Elias checked Trace's wounds. They'd held up through the stress, Rebecca's work proving its worth again. The horse was tired, sore, but whole. They were both whole. He led both horses back through the pass, past the evidence of what had happened here. There would be cleanup required, bodies to deal with, authorities to notify. But that was future work. Right now, the only thing that mattered was forward. They rode south through morning light, heading back toward the settlement. Elias had left owing Rebecca a rifle and medical supplies. He'd return them, settle his debts, and then decide what came next. For 6 years, what came next had always been more nothing, more empty country, more riding alone, more survival without purpose. But something had changed in that canyon, in the escape, and choosing to make a stand instead of keep running. Something about having a partner who couldn't talk but understood anyway. About responsibility to something beyond yourself. About stopping long enough to realize that mattering was more important than lasting. The settlement appeared on the horizon around noon. Elias rode in slow, aware that he probably looked like walking death. Rebecca emerged from the mercantile, saw him, stopped. "You're alive," she said. "Mostly," Elias agreed. He dismounted, handed her the Winchester. "As promised. Same condition I received it." Rebecca took the rifle, checked it over. "You actually survived. Against 10 men. 5 by the end," Elias said. Rest decided the price was too high. "And Calder? Won't be a problem anymore." Rebecca nodded slowly. "You should rest. Stay a few days. Recover." "Can't," Elias said. "Need to keep moving, but I'll take supplies for the road if you're selling." "Where are you heading?" Rebecca asked. Elias paused, realizing he didn't have an answer. 6 years of running meant always knowing the next destination, away from whatever was behind. But now there was no behind anymore, just forward, and forward was undefined. "North, probably," he said. "Heard there's work in Cooperton. Might be worth checking." "Cooperton's looking for a deputy," Rebecca said. "Last one retired, moved east. Town council's been trying to fill the position for 3 months." Elias looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Word travels," Rebecca said. "Even out here." A deputy position. Badge and authority and responsibility to something beyond yourself. Everything Elias had walked away from in Grafton 7 years ago. Everything he'd spent 6 years avoiding. "I'm not sure I'd be good at that anymore," Elias said. "Maybe not," Rebecca agreed. "But you stopped for a dying horse when the smart thing was to keep riding. You stood your ground when running was safer. You did right things for wrong reasons, or maybe wrong things for right reasons. Either way, you did them." She paused. "Seems like deputy work to me." Elias thought about Thomas Beck, the man who'd died from shame. Thought about Sarah, who'd wanted him to learn when to walk away. Thought about 6 years of walking away until nothing was left to walk toward. "Maybe I'll check it out," he said. "See if they're desperate enough to hire someone with my history." "They might be," Rebecca said. Desperate makes for interesting hiring decisions. She got him supplies, food, medicine for Trace, ammunition to replace what he'd used. More than his carpentry work had earned, but she waved off his objections. "Consider it payment for entertainment," she said. "Story of the man who stopped running will be worth telling for years." Elias left that afternoon, riding north with Trace beside him and the mare carrying supplies. The land rolled on, empty and indifferent as always. But empty felt different now. Less like loneliness, more like possibility. They rode through afternoon into evening, making good time. Trace's limp was barely noticeable now, the horse moving with increasing confidence. Healing was happening, slow but steady. Around sunset, Elias spotted a small stream and made camp. Built a fire for the first time in days, cooked real food, let himself stop being constantly ready for violence. The horses grazed nearby, comfortable and calm. "I'm going to need to call you by name consistently," Elias said to Trace. "Can't keep switching between you and the horse and Trace. Need to commit." The horse lifted its head, ears forward. "Trace it is then," Elias said. "For the way you read what's coming before it arrives. For the trail you left that led us through that stone passage. For the mark you've left on what I thought my life was supposed to be." Trace went back to grazing, apparently satisfied with the explanation. Elias sat by the fire, watching sparks rise into darkness. Thought about Grafton, about the man he'd been before running, about Sarah and Thomas Beck, and all the people who'd tried to tell him things he wasn't ready to hear, about a horse that had made a sound in the desert, and a choice that had seemed simple but turned out to be everything. "I don't know if this deputy thing will work," Elias said aloud. "Don't know if I'm still capable of protecting people instead of just surviving near them. But I'm going to find out. Because stopping was the right choice in that desert, and maybe it's the right choice now too." Trace huffed softly. Agreement or gas, Elias had stopped trying to distinguish. "Tomorrow we reach Cooperton," Elias continued. "Present ourselves to whoever's in charge, see if they're interested. If they are, we stay. If not, we keep moving. But either way, we move together." The fire crackled, stars emerged. The night settled into its usual pattern of sounds and silences. And for the first time in 6 years, Elias felt something that might have been peace. Not happiness, that would take time if it came at all, but peace with the choice he'd made, with stopping instead of running, with mattering instead of just lasting. "We're going to be all right," he said to Trace, "both of us. However this turns out, we're going to be all right." The horse stood nearby, dark shape against darker sky, solid and real and stubbornly present. Proof that some choices echoed beyond their immediate consequences. That stopping for a dying animal could lead to standing for something. That survival and living weren't the same thing, and sometimes living required the courage to stop surviving alone. Elias closed his eyes, finally letting exhaustion take him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to prove that stopping had been worth it. But tonight, in the quiet dark with a horse that refused to quit, he was exactly where he needed to be. Forward. Together. Whatever came next. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. The fire burned down to embers. And two figures, one human, one horse, rested in the space between what had been and what might be. No longer running from the past, finally ready to face whatever future they could build together. It wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was real.